Chapter 276. Dustless's eyes solidified as he cautiously looked at the figure floating in front of him. He could clearly see 9 mysterious small black spheres floating behind him. His skin turned pale white, and his hair turned silver white. This is the mode of the Jubi's Jinchuriki. It's really oppressive, especially his state is obviously not as complete as Madara's. Even so, it still makes me feel like I can't resist, staring intently at the Jubi Jinchuriki Obito transformed by Ling. Dustless's heart inevitably fell to the bottom. That fatal oppression made him feel like a bone in his throat, and his breathing was very difficult. Looking around, he saw Obito holding the 6-path staff. 6 black tomo appeared on his chest, and 9 black tomo and the Uzumaki clan emblem on his back. Half of his body was particularly oppressive, like a snake's skin, full of scales. Obito faintly looked at Dustless, his face was expressionless. Pretending to be a ghost. Dustless's cautious look quickly disappeared, and his mouth outlined a cold smile. At the same time, his left and right eyes began to change rapidly, and his pupils, one purple and one blue, were soon exposed. The left eye was the Rinnegan, and the right eye was the Tenseigan. Good eye power. Perceiving the change in Dustless's pupils, Obito nodded slightly, recognizing this opponent, but from the beginning to the end, he still maintained the same indifference, and his eyes were as calm as stagnant water. However, no matter how strong the eye power is, the Jubi's Jinchuriki can only suffer. The two sides are not in the same dimension at all. It's a pity that you still have to die. Raising his eyelids and looking at Dustless with pity, Obito said casually. His tone was not as gloomy and complicated as the Uchiha
The giant
Obito
Buddha
in the
statue
outside
came
world,
roaring,
and the boundless
the Obito
size,
in front of him
not
was
to
a
mention
special
resistance
existence
created
even
by
the
the
heart of
systems to kill
resistance couldn't
Dustless.
rise up.
Without fighting
It's you
spirit,
who deserves
anyone's
to
will
die,
collapse.
fool.
What's
Dustless
the use of this
sneered
attack
again and
against
again.
me? His body swept with
Seeing
golden
the giant
light and
Buddha
went straight into
statue
the
that
sky,
almost covered the
standing
entire
at the top of the
sky,
void.
Obito
smiled casually, Although the Jubi's
looking
abnormal
relaxed,
recovery
and
ability
even a little
made people blush
disdainful.
with shame, it was
However,
almost impossible
Dustless
to kill
looked
it.
at him in a more
But Dustless
strange way,
believed that any
with a
creature
sharp
would
light in
die
his
if there was
eyes,
not even a residue
as if he
left.
saw an injured beast.
At the
showing
moment,
a bloodthirsty
he didn't talk
smile.
nonsense and stared at
Whoosh,
Obito with murderous
a dense
intent.
number of fists
A
were
large
thrown
number
out,
of light
countless,
beams gathered in his
like
palm,
raindrops,
and the bright
huge
golden light
iron
shrouded
fist
the
could
whole
easily
earth.
break mountains.
Looking
and the
up at
powerful
Dustless
force was enough
Obito
to
frowned.
sweep everything.
Then his eyes fell on the golden
power
light
of this
in
technique
Dustless's
is beyond
palm,
doubt,
and just
but
smiled.
for me,
who is already a god,
Yasekani no
it's just a
Magatama.
tickle. A
His
dense
eyes
number
were
of
as
golden
calm as
light
water,
beams poured
looking
down,
at the giant
like a
fists
swarm of
coming
ants,
from the sky,
and it was impossible
Obito's
to know
expression
how
was
many there
natural,
were, and he was not afraid.
The scale is huge,
The
and
biggest
power.
difference between Jubi's Jinchuriki
Obito's
and ordinary
expression remained
ninjas
the
is
same.
the
However,
control of
he
the
was
golden
bouncing
light
back
ball
in midair,
moving towards him
and he
without
was vomiting
fear.
blood,
A huge boundless
indicating
chakra
that he
of
was
Jubi
also
itself.
seriously injured.
The
Compared to
ordinary
ordinary
ninjas'
technique
technique
in the
suddenly
world,
pointed
to some
towards the
extent,
sky.
Jubi's
What
and the
kind of
Jinchuriki
freak is
is
this
this
kid?
floating
Where
behind
did he
and
get
swept
so
out?
many
Of
unstoppable
course, the
techniques?
truth-seeking
varies from
balls
person to
Obito's
person.
face was
Head
pale,
suddenly
and
burst
you
into
dare to
his
call
own
yourself
black
a
circular
god.
barrier.
Have you
He
reached
burying
such
his
little
little body
stains
under
from
the
the corner of
protection
his
of the
mouth?
truth-seeking
I'll let you in,
balls
and he didn't
in
even
the
have
so-called
time to
god
react.
fantasy,
Seeing this,
and was directly
Dustless
swallowed
raising
by
his
the massive
eyelids,
airway.
the Obito
sneered at Obito.
Unfortunately,
The
I
disdain in his
inherited
eyes
everything
was
from
clear
the
that the Obito in the
other
outside
reason
world
why
could have
gods
been
are
killed
called
by
gods
techniques
is
that
so
they can do
skillfully.
things
Recalling
that
the
ordinary
destructive
humans
even when
can't
Obito
force.
didn't
Obito
completely
said
control
if
the
one
Dreamy
day
fear,
the
humans can do
truth-seeking balls
things
that
that
gods
gods
can
can
do.
His bones were all
Then
broken
gods
and
will
shattered,
directly
or
skip
as
and
an
become
eternal
ordinary
organs were
member
all
of the
dislocated
3,000
in an
The
instant.
truth-seeking ball is really
Obito
the most
in front
troublesome
of him,
technique.
the Jubi's
Dustless and here
Jinchuriki,
barely
it is
invincible
invincible
minor
on both
injuries,
offense
and even
and
without the
defense.
factor
Do
of
you think it's
chakra
over?
and Jubi.
It is indeed a
Dustless
technique
still
that
only
only
those who
Obito.
have stepped into the realm of
Seeing
God
Obito
can
breathe a
Obito
sigh of
was
relief,
silent,
looking
looking
at
at
the
the
black
defensive
defensive
giant
giant
that
blocked
coming
the
towards him,
dense
and at the
light
same
beam.
time,
Dustless couldn't
the giant
help but
crimson
nod
flame
in
barrier
previously
separated
hidden
him
in the
from
ground
the
raised
attack
the truth-seeking ball
and the
can
arm of the
create
beam
a
that was
Uchiha
hurling
world.
formation.
It is not
suddenly
wrong
lifted
at all.
up.
The crimson flame enchantment
Boom,
was
boom,
exposed
boom.
in the
Dustless's
air.
beam that was
Separating the
separating
face
the
of
beam
the
instantly
radiated from his
from his
eyes
eyes
were
and the
unusually
slender
dangerous.
beams that
was
rose
hot
from the
enough
ground
to
crush the
stared at the
void
light
and
beam
went
fell
straight
on
into
the
Obito
defensive
in
wall,
midair.
and were
The
easily
highest
bounced
temperature
off.
was like the red
resistance
lotus
of
coming
a
fire
huge crowd
that was hundreds of kilometers
It was
long
impossible
appeared on
to
the ground.
get close to it.
Clang,
Don't even think
clang,
about it.
bang,
Looking up,
bang,
he
bang,
saw that the
beam
golden
coming
light
without
ground
exception
fell on the
Obito
dense
forced
beam
his ball
ball
landed
down
on flame
and
and
at the same time,
and there was no
he
sign
controlled
of
the
collapse,
flame enchanted
and the
boundary
boundary
which
was
was 10
tended to
centimeters
resist
tall.
the destruction of
What
the
a
golden
strange
lightsaber.
technique.
It can be intact
Soon,
after
boom,
coming
boom,
in contact with the truth seeking
in all
ball.
directions.
Inside the
Immerse
truth
was
seeking
the
ball,
barrier in front of
Abito
him,
frowned,
and crushed
his
towards
face was
Abito.
full of doubt.
Compared to Senju
A pincer
Hashirama,
attack from
although
the
the
sides was
baits were
extremely
different, my
dangerous, and the
cultivation is
truth-seeking
not
ball
deep.
couldn't erode them at all.
However,
I have both
it
the
coincides
Uchiha's
with
blood
my
and
conjecture.
Senju's cells, so I can
The
use would
glinting
release more
fruit doesn't
perfectly
belong
than
to
anyone
this
else,
world,
including Hashirama.
Although the truth-seeking ball can
Dustless
resist
said
the power of the
confidently.
devil fruit,
With
it
the
can't
power of
directly
6
collapse
paths,
it, so
he could use would release perfectly.
Dustless's face was full of anger, and his
Even
eyes were full
Hashirama
of
could
killing
only
intent.
look at him and sigh.
When he used the elephant shift technique
sure enough,
to seal the
in less
achibi,
than a few breaths of
Dustless's
time,
body couldn't
the
exert
cracks
the
on the
power
barrier
of the devil
fire
fruit,
grew bigger
which
and
shows
bigger.
that the power of the devil
The
fruit
long
is
and narrow
fundamentally
hole
different.
swallowed the entire barrier
After
of
all,
fire.
the truth-seeking ball
Bang!
can only
In the
nullify
end,
ninjutsu.
it couldn't
but the
resist the
glinting
attack.
fruit doesn't belong to the
The
category of
flame-enchanted
ninjutsu.
boundary turned into snow-like
Whoosh,
fragments
whoosh,
and fell
whoosh.
to the ground.
Boundless golden light beams
Abito,
roared down,
who was behind
densely
it,
packed
naturally
like a
couldn't
rainstorm,
escape the
writing
great
its own
Buddha's
prelude
fist.
to destruction.
It's broken.
Even if
His
Abito
eyes were
inside
empty
the
as he stared
truth-seeking
at the
ball was
oncoming
safe
giant
and sound.
fists.
The ground around him was
Abito
full of
lost
holes,
his mind
and
for
the
a
ground
moment.
that was intact before had
In a
countless
trance,
holes.
he instinctively controlled
This
the
tragic
truth-seeking
scene
ball
lasted
to
for
form
a few minutes
defensive
before it
enchantment.
stopped.
Bang!
Although I don't know what kind of
bang,
strange
the
ninjutsu
giant
this
fists
is,
all fell on
it
the
seems to be
defensive
just a
enchantment.
so-so. Because of the sage method,
Perceiving
the
that
truth-seeking
Dustless's
ball
attack
couldn't make it
stopped,
collapse.
the
liquid truth-seeking ball
Abito
once
could
again
only
returned
hide
to its
in the
original
truth-seeking
state,
ball and
turning into a
passively
dark
defend.
sphere floating behind Abito.
Your time of death has come.
Raising his eyes slightly,
Staring
Abito
at Abito
stared
and
at
the
Dustless
enchantment,
in the sky
Dustless's
indifferently,
murderous
and
aura
without
was
hesitation,
overflowing,
and the
Abito's
evil
sentenced
golden chakra
Dustless to
erupted
death,
from his
and
body.
his body also began to
The
float and
boundless
fly into
chakra
the
erupted
sky.
from Dustless's body
The
and
two figures
expanded
stayed
without
in the
limit,
sky at the
forming
same
a
time,
giant with a
looking
height
at
of
each other
dozens of feet.
indifferently.
Looking
What a
up,
pity,
Abito
Abito
saw this golden giant with
looking
two
directly
heads
at
and 4
Abito with a
arms.
smile. Dustless
There were
grinned.
2 straight tachi on his
That
waist.
malicious smile made Abito
He was
frown,
covered in
and
ancient
ripples
and
appeared
simple
in his
armor,
heart, making him feel
on his head was
unusually
a ferocious
uncomfortable.
and extraordinary Tengu
I may
armor.
have to disappoint you, Abito.
He was mighty and unyielding.
Since the glinting
His
fruit
scarlet
works on
evil
you,
eyes were
if
like
it's
a devil
combined
from
with
hell.
the sage technique,
As
you
long
may
as
be
he
in big
glanced at
trouble.
you, your soul would tremble. It was
Chapter
Dustless's
277.
complete form Kansusunu.
The two figures in the sky
Without the
observed
sage
each
method
other,
chakra,
and their sharp
I
eyes
can't
seemed
hunt
to
any harm
penetrate
to
each
him.
other.
Yin-yang release can
I'm going to
nullify
be
any
unlucky.
ninjutsu in the world.
As if he heard the
The
funniest joke
truth-seeking
in the
ball
world,
also has the
Abito's
same
mouth
ability.
raised a contemptuous
It
and
can erase
sarcastic
any matter
smile.
that comes
You
in
should
contact
know when to
with it.
stop. In front of the
The simplest and most practical
any
way
ninjutsu
to deal with
in the
them
world
is the
is
sage
invalid
method.
dash.
Seeing
In
Dustless
that
staring
case,
at him with a
the
playful
sage method,
expression,
all
all
the
the
pores
pores
on
on
his
his
body
body
opened,
opened, and the words on the
majestic
tip of his
majestic
tongue chakra
disappeared.
overflowed from Dustless's
Only
body
now
and
did he
poured into
realize
the
that the
huge body of
truth-seeking ball was
Kansusunu.
ineffective against the
The
golden
golden
flash.
irregular mysterious runes
This
were
guy's
like fish
ability is
entering
not
the sea,
bad,
and he
cheerfully
shouldn't be
flowing
worse
in
than
complete
me.
body
Be careful.
Susanu's body.
Converging
In
his
the blink of an
contempt,
eye,
Abito
they
became
expanded
cautious,
to every corner
and in
of
his
complete
heart,
body
he labeled
Susanu,
Dustless
and
as a
complete
dangerous
body
person.
Susanu's physique once again
Not to
enlarged.
mention the strange large-scale attack ninjutsu before.
Suddenly,
Just
the
the
ground
9
under
Tomo Rinnegan and the
Susanu's
blue
feet
eyes are
collapsed.
enough to attract attention.
Apparently,
it couldn't bear the weight of the giant body.
Frowning slightly,
and the ground sank.
Abito noticed that the chakra
because
in
of the
Dustless's
injection
body
of the
went
sage
berserk,
method,
and
the
his
height of
pupils widened,
Kansusanu's complete
revealing
form
a
was
look of
sublimated
horror.
again, reaching
Even
a
if the amount
terrifying
of height of
chakra is
5
not
or
as good as the
600
juvies
feet
in his body. The
Even the
amount
white
is also
clouds floating in the
unprecedented.
sky stopped at the waist
How
of
can an
Kansusanu.
ordinary human have so much?
Kansusanu,
Whoosh.
no one in the history of
While
Uchiha
Abito
has
was
surpassed
thinking
me,
hard about
and
where
that includes
Dustless's chakra
Uchiha
came
Madara.
from, a sharp sound suddenly came from the
With
front.
a proud smile,
Looking
Dustless
up,
looked down at the
Dustless's
ant-like
figure has
Abito below,
disappeared,
and
when
with a
he
slight
reappeared,
movement of his
he
mind,
was already in front of him.
Kansusanu's tachi of light came out,
Light-speed kick,
and the golden light shrouded
Good
the
boy,
entire
you
sky
have
and
guts,
covered the
and you
entire
are courageous enough to send yourself to your death. Staring at Dustless and the
Chapter
golden
280.
flash flying towards him,
Dustless,
Abito
who
sneered
was in the
again and
immortal
again,
spell complete
revealing
body
his killing
Susanoo,
intent.
looked indifferent.
He gently waved his arm
Looking
forward,
around,
and the
the whole
truth-seeking
system
ball
world
behind
was
him
in
rushed
his
out.
eyes.
There was no
apart.
creature at the top of the clouds.
Seeing that
Only
Dustless's leg
Dustless
was
was
about to
admiring
touch the
himself,
truth-seeking ball,
looking down at
Abito
the
coldly
thousands of
said,
miles of rivers and mountains
"Any matter
below.
that comes in contact with the
Suddenly,
truth-seeking ball
a feeling
will be
of looking
completely
down at the
erased,
mountains
without
and mountains
exception.
appeared in his heart.
apart. As if the existence
in the next
of Susanu
moment,
was deterring the
Abito was
limit,
stunned,
the surrounding
and his breathing
clouds
and
and mist
expression were
dispersed
all
one after
stagnant.
another, and the dense
The
and
black
endless
light
sky
easily
suddenly
passed
became
through the
very
golden
clear,
light,
and
but
what
everything
Abito
could be
didn't
seen at a
expect was that
glance.
Dustless's calf didn't
The
collapse
heavens
and
are so
disappear because
small.
of the contact. Just like what Abito said
Instead,
before,
it seemed to
I am now
disappear into
equivalent
thin
to a
air,
god who can
completely
create and destroy
ignoring
the
its
world.
existence.
Looking down at the battered ground
calf,
below,
which could shatter a
Dustless
mountain,
muttered to himself
swept toward his
expressionlessly.
head.
At
What
the
kind
same
of joke
time,
is this?
he crossed his arms in front
How
of
could
him and
such a
closed
thing
his
happen?
eyes naturally. Cursing in his heart, he
Consistently
began to dance with the
arms in front
tachi
of
of
his
light
eyes
that had
in
been
shock.
unsheathed for a long time.
At such a short
The
distance,
dazzling
there
golden
wasn't
light
enough
made
time
people
for him
not
to
dare
activate
to look directly
divine
at
might
it and defend himself.
They could only secretly observe it through the small gaps between the 5
force
fingers.
that could destroy heaven and
The
earth.
pitch-black
Rushed
shadow
towards
fell
Abito.
mercilessly,
And the
Abito
tachi
suddenly
that contained the
gave a
power
muffled
to
groan,
destroy
and
everything
blood
fell
spurted from the
mercilessly.
corner of his mouth.
The huge golden
His whole
slash
body
covered
was
the
like a
sky and
cannonball
covered
as
the
he was
earth,
bombarded
like
to
the
the
full
ground.
blow of a god.
Boom, boom, boom.
The void that
A
was still
huge
clear
crater
just
was
now
formed on the
dimmed,
ground,
like the
and
sunset at
Abito was
dusk.
lying motionless on the
There
ground.
was a faint buzzing sound that was filled
This
with
guy
endless
is
sadness.
really abnormally strong.
As the wielder of the tachi,
I thought his body was
Dustless's
more
face
fragile,
was filled
but
with
who would have
loneliness.
thought that it was as hard as a
The
meteorite?
aura of isolation spread
Dustless
out,
in the
and he
sky
looked
looked at
coldly
Abito
the
in the
enemy.
crater and couldn't help
His
but frown.
emotionless eyes were filled
His
with
little
indifference.
foot was still slightly numb.
Whoosh!
Just now,
The huge
he
golden
didn't feel like
flash
he
swept
kicked a
towards
soft
the
human
enchantment
body
made by the truth-seeking
Dustless
jade.
felt like he kicked a
Under
meteorite.
this bright luster,
The omnipotent
staring at
truth-seeking
Abito,
jade
who was
also
still
showed
lying
its
in the
weak
crater,
side,
half
and was
dead.
directly
Dustless's
swallowed by the
face
sharp
was cold,
slash, and his pupils were surging
Boom,
with
boom,
hostility.
boom.
The powerful force
His 5
directly
fingers were
swallowed
straight,
Abito,
and all of his
pulled out a
fingertips
long
were
and
surrounded
narrow
by
hole that was
flashing
nearly
golden
100
light.
kilometers long on the
The
ground.
Jubi's Jinchuriki was not
It was
so
like a
fragile.
natural moat that could not be
It was
crossed.
even more ridiculous to kick
Facing
a
this
Jinchuriki
thick
to
crack,
death.
a sense of helplessness
Whoosh,
rose
whoosh,
in his
whoosh.
heart, and his
Countless
face
small
was
light
filled with
bullets
despair.
shot out from his 5 fingers.
Dustless was
desperately
desperately roaring
cursing.
down. The
When he
target was
defeated
naturally
the enemy,
Abito,
it
who
was
in the
not
pit.
only the physical body that
After
was defeated,
many years,
but also the
Dustless
heart.
no longer learned Kazara's
As
tricks,
expected of the
and
legendary
developed many
10-tailed
different tricks
beast.
on his own.
Such a
The
huge
ability of
chakra,
glinting
with such a
fruit was to
vigorous
turn one's
vitality and
physique into a
recovery
mysterious
ability,
thing like
under the
light,
observation
and it
of
had
the
great
10
potential in the future.
Dustless could clearly see that
Boom,
Abito's
boom,
truth-seeking
boom.
ball
Dense
was shattered
golden
by
light
brute
fell from the
force,
sky,
and even his
and
whole body
mercilessly
was covered
covered
in
in
blood.
Abito.
Some of
and
his heart organs
unscrupulously
were
changed the
exposed,
appearance of
but
the
under
ground.
the terrifying recovery ability
It was like
of the
thousands
Jubi,
of blades,
he was able to
and the
recover
sharpness
quickly.
was enough to turn Abito
In
into
less
a
than a
stick.
blink of an eye.
It
The
was as
truth
good
of
as
taking
new.
advantage of a person's
How
illness was known to the
terrifying.
world,
And
no one
Dustless
can
knew it
compare
even
to his
more.
endurance.
This is just the
Seeing
beginning.
this,
Dustless sighed.
What can the Jubi's Jinchuriki do?
The Jubi's
Today,
recovery
I will
ability
take
was
everything
something
from
anyone
you and
could
use it
admire.
for myself.
Dustless
The
even
corner of his
remembered
mouth
that
swept
Rikudu
into a
Madara
cold
recovered
heart.
after being
Dustless's
pierced
face
through
was
the heart
covered
by
with
Hashman
frost,
Kai,
and the chakra in his body
looking at
began to
Abito
boil,
indifferently,
like an
Dustless's
erupting volcano.
eyes flashed with a strange light.
Celestial way.
The
In an
effect of
instant,
Abito's fusion
Dustless's
with the
body
Jubi
was
is
like a black
obviously
hole
not
in the
as good as
universe,
Uchiha
crazily
Madara.
swallowing and absorbing
There is
the
a
natural
gap between the
chakra.
two sides.
The
Squinting,
chakra that filled his
staring
body,
at Abito's
whether
left
it was
and
the
right
power
eyes,
or the content,
Dustless shook his
increased
head.
by several levels in
The
a short
value of
time.
the Rinnegan can't be fully
At the
exerted
highest
at all.
point of the sky, red
Only
round
when it
wood
falls
was
on a
faintly
peerless
seen falling
hero
from
like
the sky,
Madara can its
and the
value
number
be
was hard to
reflected.
predict.
In the end,
Bright God
Abito
Gate.
is a spare tire.
Ping,
The
ping,
one in the
ping.
system is.
In the deep pit
and the
where
one in the
Abito was
outside
lying,
world is also.
most of the red round would piled
Don't
up
underestimate
in an instant,
me. And the large number
In
of
the
the
dark,
red round would
Abito
fill the
seemed
big
to feel
pit,
Dustless's
stirring up
ridicule,
high dust.
and he jumped up and flew
The
straight
power of
toward
the bright
sky,
God Gate was
looking down
beyond
at
doubt.
Dustless with a cold face.
Senja Hashirama had
It
even
can be
used this
clearly
technique
seen
to
that at this
suppress the
moment,
wild state of the
Abito's
Jubi
face was pale
before
and
becoming
weak,
a
giving a
Jinchuriki.
feeling of a serious
Boom,
illness,
boom,
and his
boom.
whole body was full of indescribable fragility.
After a moment of calmness,
Obviously,
a strong
although the
chakra
previous
wave
hideous
suddenly
wound
broke
has
out
been
in the deep
repaired,
pit,
the wound
and
in
the
the
whole
heart
earth
can't be
shook
repaired,
violently like an
and the
earthquake.
unprecedented physical torture
At the
of being
same
cut
time,
open is
the
not
red
a joke.
sacred wood that filled the big
that
pit
I didn't
also
exert
turned
its
black,
value at all,
as if its vitality was being
It's a
sucked
pity that
dry
it was wasted,
and broken to
but there
pieces.
are still some things on you that I
The
can
deep
use,
pit was
so
filled
it's
with
not a
dust,
waste.
and dark yellow smoke
Looking at
covered the
Abito's
entire
Manjiki
sky.
Sharingan,
Dustless
do you think
said
this trick
thoughtfully,
to trick a child can subdue
as long
me?
as he can defeat Abito,
Should
he
I
can get
say that
everything
you are
from him,
naive,
including
or should
the
I say
Jubi
that you are
chakra
too
in his
confident
body
in your own
and the
strength?
Kamui Dojutsu.
A mocking and disdainful
Injuring me
voice was
makes you
thrown
so
out from the
arrogant
dust,
that you forget
and
yourself.
a tyrannical chakra was released.
Staring at Dustless,
The
Abito
sand
said
and dust
with
in the
hatred,
sky was
and the
suppressed
chakra
in an
began
instant,
to surge
and
violently,
the clear sky
and the
was
palm of his
restored.
hand suddenly split
Ignorant
open,
fool,
and a
how
mysterious
can
black
such a
iron
fragile
rod
no
appeared.
Kutan?
That's,
You bastard.
It seems
seems to be yin-yang release. Abito was about to ridicule Dustless, but he was distracted by the pupil that came into his eyes, and his face has no effect on him. Sorry to have kept you waiting for a long time. Abito didn't intend to use this ordinary black iron rod. This technique requires a huge amount of natural chakra. Instead, and the absorbed natural chakra was used to suppress you, and casually threw it to the ground. But fortunately, the time to suppress you is enough to refine more natural chakra. Dustless chuckled with concealed way, Senjutsu perfect form, 2,000 hands flashed with understanding. His light eyes fell on Obito,
Chapter
as if silently telling him to come at him if he has any means,
the moment
which made the latter's heart
Buddha
even more
appeared,
gloomy. The entire earth began to tremble, for similar black iron rods were thrown out, and they were connected to each other in a regular pattern,
but that was the truth,
and it was clearly seen that they were hexagonal. Eyebrows
it really
knitted
is
together.
The six crimson
Obito
yang
took
formation.
a deep breath. But what does he mean by
couldn't
using
help
the
but be
six crimson
shocked
yang
at the huge
formation?
size of the Buddha.
Is he afraid that I will run away?
The giant Buddha
looking
made
at
up
the
of
thousands
thousands
of
of Buddha
iron rods
from the
could no
corner of
longer
his
be
eyes.
described with the
Dustless
word
secretly
shouting.
murmured.
The majestic
same
size
time,
was like a
he
moving
began
mountain.
to be
vigilant.
Phew.
Obito obviously
First
did this
time
because he was afraid
technique.
that he would run away. Although it's a bit difficult
In this
to
case,
control,
it
it's
meant
quite
that he
simple.
must be
preparing an unknown big move.
Dustless
stood on top of the Buddha's head and smiled. Six crimson
Even
yang
if it was
formation.
his first time using the senjutsu
as Obito's voice
would
fell,
release,
with the previous
although
black
he wasn't
iron
very
rod
familiar
as the
with
center,
it wasn't
hexagonal
difficult to
dark red
control.
enchantment was suddenly
It's
formed,
big,
isolating the entire
but
world
with
outside.
such a big size,
completely
the
sealing
target
it.
is also big.
Only Dustless and
Obito
nodded
were
in
inside
agreement.
the
enchantment. The size of
Bring
this
it
giant
on.
Buddha was beyond the scope
Dustless,
of human
who
knowledge.
was in the
six crimson yang
It wouldn't
formation,
be an
was
exaggeration
not
to
afraid
say
of that it was a
Obito.
ninjutsu used by
Instead,
a god,
he
but the
took an
target
inch
was
and
also
wanted a
very
mile,
big,
provoking
and it wasn't good at
Obito.
moving. In fact, the user of this technique, Senju
Chapter
Hashirama,
281,
was indeed called a god.
Raising
the god
his
of
eyes
ninjas.
slightly,
Wuchen looked around.
his face
the
became
crimson
gloomy,
sun
and
formation
he emitted a
with
burning,
serious
killing
expression.
intent.
After a while,
great
the
sword
smile
shot
in
out
his
from his
eyes
hand.
disappeared. It was more
He
than
found
10
that it was
meters
a little
long,
difficult
and
for
it
him
looked
to
break
break
this ordinary,
but it
looking
had an
hexagonal
indescribable
calm
sharpness.
barrier.
Thinking
This strange
back,
spiral
he began to
greatsword
recall
seemed
the
to be able to
six
destroy
crimson
all
yang
things.
formation.
It was
It's
the
worthy
divine
of being
sword,
the strongest
heavenly swamp
enchantment
spear
that can resist four Jidama
the
at the
user's
same
strong will
time.
would be attached to the sword.
Its toughness
creating
can't
such
be
a sword of the
underestimated.
heart. Is this
Controlling
guy
the
also
heavenly
going to
swamp
release
spear
Jidama?
required a strong will.
Dustless's eyes
The
flashed
stronger
with
the
a touch
person's
of clarity,
confidence,
and his
the more
voice
they
was
could
low,
use the sword to the
slightly
extreme.
depressed.
Stop
the Jidama
here.
released by the Jidama
Staring
is
at
enough
the
to
giant
crush
Buddha
together.
that was
whizzing towards him.
Even the
Obito's
Jidama
face
released
was
by the
covered in
Hachibi
frost.
and the Kyubi can only look
He
at it
circulated
inside.
his aura to the maximum,
But this
and the
ordinary
black
looking
spiral sword
enchantment
in his
front of
hand
him
swept
can
over like a
withstand
wave,
four Jidama of
wanting
the
to
Jidama.
split the giant Buddha statue
It's self-evident
into two.
how strong the defense is.
Six paths Senon's heavenly
But how can
swamp
physical
spear
attacks
not
work
bad.
on me?
Dustless's
nodded.
depressed look swept away.
This heavenly
and
swamp
even the corner
spear
of his
formed
mouth
by
was
yin
lightly
yang
humming an
release,
unknown
so
tune.
its power was needless to
Although
say.
it sounded nondescript,
The stronger
it's
the
not
person's
difficult
will,
to see that
the greater the
Dustless's
power
heart
they
was as
could
calm
use.
as water. Now that
Dustless
Obito
didn't
vowed
care
to
about
kill
Obito
Dustless
at all.
he naturally used
Only
the heavenly
people like
swamp
Madara
spear to the
who
extreme.
opened Rinnegan can attract his
But
attention.
you are not the sage of six paths, Obito. At
You are
this
still
moment,
far from
the ground
it.
suddenly burst open,
Dustless
and a
smiled
thick
faintly,
tree emerged
looking
from
at
the
the
ground.
oncoming
black greatsword
Like
with a
a
mocking
spiritual
expression.
snake,
It surged
Suddenly,
towards the sky
the
at a
Tensegan
rapid
in his
speed.
right eye
surged with powerful
For
eye power
giant purplish red
fluctuations
flower
that seemed to be
buds
able
could
to
be clearly
distort time and
seen.
space, and the
The
space
surroundings
around
were
Dustless
filled with an
began to
unknown
ripple.
sticky liquid,
And
the
the
emerald
emerald
green
green
light
light immediately
permeated the
covered
air.
Dustless's entire body.
Fortunately,
and a few
I've
green
seen
Lady
Lady
Huey's
Huey's real
also
body
appeared
before.
behind him.
Otherwise,
The immortal of the
I'd
six
really
paths might be
associate
able
her
to
with the
destroy
flower
the world
demon.
with this sword, but
When
you
the
can't.
foreign smell entered his ears
Dustless,
and nose,
who had entered the
Wuchen
Tensegan
frowned
chakra
slightly.
mode, sneered
He
secretly.
casually
blew a breeze to blow away the
At the
strange
same
smell
time,
as he muttered
he shook
to
his
himself.
arm slightly,
and
in
several
all
prayer
fairness,
beads behind
after
him
seeing
flew
the
to
jubi in the
Dustless's
sacred
chest.
tree one after another.
Staring
No
at the
one
black
would imagine
greatsword
that the
flying
original
towards
state
him,
was a
the
graceful
light in
woman.
Dustless's eyes became even more obvious.
The smell
and
of
the
foreign
determination
creatures
in
was
his
even
eyes
stronger,
became even deeper.
and it spread throughout the enchantment.
In front of him, several
Looking
green
around,
prayer beads
the
suddenly
four flower
gathered in the
buds
palm
that were
of
originally
Dustless's
closed
hand,
all bloomed.
turning into a weak golden light
The
beam
putrid
that
and
remained in
nauseating
Dustless's
smell
palm,
came from within the flower
condensing and
bud.
not dissipating.
It was
revealing
like a black
black aura
hole,
that could cut through
bottomless.
all things. An ancient
It's
aura
time for you to
continuously
end
gushed
it,
out from
Uchiha
within,
Obito.
describing its own extraordinariness.
After that,
the golden light in
it could
Dustless's
devour
hand
and
stretched
erase all
infinitely,
matter.
boundless,
Funny,
and was completely
in front of
different
me,
from the
you
heavenly
still want
swamp
to grow
spear.
without limit.
Golden
Dustless's
reincarnation
face became
explosion,
cold,
and he laughed
Whoosh.
sarcastically. The golden
complete
light
form
poured
of
out,
Senjutsu
and the golden
Susanoo
light
suddenly
suddenly
crossed
crossed
its
directly
hands,
towards
and
the
the
heavenly
wind and
swamp
clouds
spear
in the sky
formed by the
surged.
yin yang release.
As if it was summoned
At
by
this
the god
moment,
of light,
time
a
and
large
space
number
were
of light
frozen
beams
forever.
rushed over,
like a
boom,
spring in the
boom,
deep
boom.
sea, crazily
The
swallowing
two rays
and
of
of light,
the photons,
one black and
constantly
one gold,
compressing
converged
and
together,
the dregs.
and the void suddenly
This
exploded.
is the price to pay for treating
White
me as
boiling
air.
waves of air were emitted, and the entire sky was on fire in an instant. The temperature rose to 100 times higher than usual, and it was exceptionally hot.
Magatama
has already limited the development of its power to the greatest extent,
side by
and
side
now it
with
is
the heavenly
fused with
swamp
Senjutsu,
spear,
which is a more powerful nature chakra. His pupils dilated naturally and increased by several times at the golden light beam that blocked the heavenly ball that was only the size of a palm. Also he unconsciously took a deep leap and became especially the arm that was controlling the heavenly swamp. Not only did its power increase, but the area it covered was also unprecedentedly vast and infinite, to approach, almost filling the entire enchantment. Go die for me. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Eyes red, teeth clenched, chakra gushed out of Obito's body. The enchantment that was originally dark red control the heavenly swamp spear, and it was unusually dazzling. He wanted to annihilate the huge golden light ball, but he eroded the big tree unscrupulously. The heavenly swamp spear is a sword of will. Layer by layer, it seems that your conviction to kill me is not as strong as my Tao. It was a horrible sight. Dustless was expressionless. The same was true and his for eyes the earth. Emitted a cold light that could penetrate all things, and the ground was covered with dense holes. He said without a ripple, "You can't understand where my Tao lies. It seems that if I don't kill me is very strong, this my Tao battle will not end." After the natural destruction of the big tree and the light ball, Dustless originally hoped that this technique could also kill Obito, and the time they spent together rushed into Dustless's mind, whimsical, and he was instantly energized. In the face of the abnormal recovery ability of the ten-tailed Jinchuriki, even if Obito was suffering from physical destruction, he raised his eyelids and looked at Obito with pity, and his cold voice resounded through the sky. This was because every time Obito was beaten into a bloody mess, by the system his abnormal recovery ability would make him unscathed. So, unless it's better for you to die peacefully, otherwise it is impossible to kill him. The chakra on Dustless's body began to go berserk again, and boundless energy broke out of his body and poured into the golden light beam. The originally bright light beam shone even brighter, and the awe-inspiring luster penetrated through everything in the world. With a heavy look in his eyes, Dustless's murderous intent exploded. The hundreds of feet long light beam stretched out again, he had the ten-tailed Jinchuriki in his body, through the earth, and he could endlessly repair his body into the depths of the earth. Moreover, chakra was endless. It can still grow. Is there no limit? On the other hand, although chakra was also very large, the continuous battle had consumed more than 30% violently, and his expression became gloomier. The advantage would become a disadvantage. Looking at the crazy face of Dustless, without thinking, his heart trembled fiercely, removed the and he was deeply that was integrated with the mystical technique. At this moment, Dustless gave him the feeling of a monster who was possessed by a demon. It would be more straightforward to use the truth-seeking all over his body. And the irregular blood vessels of Rinnegan was about to make his like a spider web. The big tree that was beaten the entire eyeball again came out from the depths of the terrifying and gloomy. This time, even Obito was more excessive than before. This was not the gap in strength, was actually but the madness of the mentality. What made Dustless facing this fierce expression of abandoning everything to fight to the death? Mucus. No one could remain calm. There were small black balls floating. The golden light penetrated the earth without limit, as if to completely penetrate the entire earth. His pupils slightly shrank. Dustless's calm eyes rippled. Suppressing the fear in his heart, Obito's eyes instantly regained clarity. By Obito's madness. Dustless was controlling the long and narrow golden light beam with one hand. He was surrounded by the powerful, his movement was restricted, and it was a good opportunity to himself will also be swallowed by the sixth Baijidama. Obito flew directly towards Dustless. The chain reaction caused by the simultaneous explosion behind him floated above Obito's head, wanting to give a fatal blow. I am afraid no one will be relieved. The attack range of the truth-seeking balls is only 70 meters. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get rid of you and use the truth-seeking the ripples in the bottom of his eyes quickly disappeared. What a good abacus, Dustless regained but your plan is doomed to fail, Obito. He looked at the Baijidama, the blood vessels in his eyes quickly converged, and the mocking smile on the corner of his mouth became more obvious and profound. Staring at the rapidly approaching Obito and the 9 truth-seeking balls above his head, Dustless's eyes suddenly high-density chakra and the light emitted from his eyes was extremely dangerous, and the dark Baijidama was feeling of uneasiness. The 9 deep in the Rinnegan in his left eye rippled to the source of and the chakra. 9 black balls there was hanging on the black coil trembled slightly. Soon you will be mine. The sight of the Rinnegan also staring fell at the on huge black Baijidama power began to go out of control. Didn't hide the covetous look in his eyes. After the boundless and almost infinite chakra is given fiercely, to him, and it could be clearly seen that the large-scale invisible ripples spread out, even annihilating everything that came into contact he will be safe and sound in her hands. The invisible airwave was like the Baijidama on the bud bloomed at the same time, and anything that came into contact with it was destroyed, which was rotating at high speed. This was one of the powers of Dustless's Rinnegan, and the shadow in his heart could not be waved away. That was far more than the super increasing Baijidama almost filled the entire space of the enchantment would be obliterated by this repulsive force. Buzz. Obito was also crushed by this barrier was softly humming, kid's body and the invisible humming sound seemed to be begging such a powerful airwave, adding a little dark there was no change in the color of doomsday to the void. Obito's face was cold, and his temperament was isolated from the world. His face was full of scales from the beginning to the end, and he maintained an endless killing intent. The existence of Obito in the system only has one essence, which is to kill dustless. Goodbye. Staring at the huge tree, or simply looking at the Baijidama in the mouth of the bud, Obito was expressionless, and the eyes emitted from his pupils were also abnormally cold, without any luster, as if he was looking at a dead person. Of course, it was not ruled out that dustless at this moment was a corpse in his eyes. Boom boom boom. The 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached the limit, and began to make a boom 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 sound, and the airwaves thrown out, even the slightest one was comparable to a hurricane of more than 10 levels. In short, the space within the 6 Crimson Yang formation was a complete mess, no different from the apocalypse. The scattered waves of air were unable to penetrate the dark red defensive barrier, but they wreaked havoc on the ground like a swamp. The space inside the system was slightly trembling. The ferocious airwaves were like thousands of blades, easily changing the environment inside the enchantment barrier, and everything that came in contact with it collapsed. However, the strange thing was that when these ferocious astral winds passed through Dustless, there was no effect. Dustless was clearly standing motionless in the same place, but he seemed to be like a reflection in the water, unable to cause any physical damage. This guy's ability. Seeing this, Obito frowned deeply. This kind of ability to ignore physical attacks was simply unheard of. It was absolutely impossible to use the word heaven-defying to describe it. Humph, any ninjutsu has an unknown weakness. In the face of 6 Baijidama, let's see what confidence you have to resist. Seeing Wu Chen's indifferent expression, turning a deaf ear to the 6 giant Baijidama, Obito snorted and remained silent. He had a feeling that he was being looked down upon. You actually dare to look down on me, I'll make you suffer. Obito stared at Wu Chen with a murderous look on his face. He secretly said in his heart. Strong people have their own pride. Wu Chen remained calm in front of 6 Baijidamas. That was a slap to his face. Suddenly, several dark beads flew out from the top of his head, and Obito controlled them to liquefy them, and with himself as the center, they formed a 360-degree circular defensive enchantment barrier. There was no doubt that these dark beads were naturally the truth-seeking jade, the most perfect technique, and one of the most important signs of stepping into the realm of gods. It could be used to retreat, defend, and attack. It was a perfect existence. Let's see how you resist. Obito's whole body was completely sealed by the truth-seeking jade's defensive enchantment, and his cold voice lingered in the air for a long time, as if it was filled with endless magic, and didn't disperse for a long time. Staring at the completely sealed Obito, the cold smile on the corner of Dustless's mouth became even more obvious, and his murderous intent was fully exposed. Although those 6 Baijidama were extremely terrifying, Dustless really didn't care about them. Ordinary attacks like these really couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Do you think you are invincible with the truth-seeking jade's defensive enchantment? Naive. Seeing Obito shrinking back inside the truth-seeking jade to avoid the impact of the Baijidama, Dustless's chakra began to go berserk, and his murderous intent was awe-inspiring. As for those monstrous Baijidama, he directly ignored it. Boom boom boom. 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached their limit, and shot out from the disgusting mouth of the flower bud, and directly rushed in all directions. The moment they came into contact with the 6 Crimson Yang array, the Baijidama broke into pieces, and the whole enchantment barrier was set on fire. Although the 6 Crimson Yang array can withstand the attack of 4 Baijidama, but when the number of Baijidama reached 6, it was obviously a bit difficult, and the cracking sound of the barrier could be clearly heard. Everything has a limit, and the 6 Crimson Yang array in front of him is such. Boom boom boom. The solid barrier shattered like a mirror, and the blazing heat wave caused by the Baijidamas of the 6 ten-tailed beasts swallowed the world in an instant. The entire world inside the system turned fiery red. On the other hand, Dustless was standing in the sky as if nothing happened, staring at Obito. His whole body was bathed in a sea of fire, but it couldn't hurt him. With a bloodthirsty smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless's chakra began to become restless. Everyone knew the rule of reciprocity, and Wu Chen was no exception. Dustless in the depths of the sea of fire was expressionless, and under the Tensigan chakra mode, his whole body was floating with the luster of emerald. But before that, I'll temporarily restrict your movements. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless's eyes flashed with horror, and the Rinnegan Sharingan surged with cold murderous intent. Obito's movement speed is very fast, and if he doesn't restrict his speed while casting a technique, even if he can barely hit him, it will be difficult to achieve a fatal effect. Staring at Obito, who was still under the protection of the truth-seeking jade, Dustless sneered again and again, his palm facing the sky, and suddenly 15 high-density chakra energy balls flew out of his hand. Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 283. 15 dark beads floated to the sky, and the majestic repulsive force spread out and shrouded the entire earth. Suddenly putting his hands together, Dustless stared at Obito and saw that the latter was still hiding in the enchantment, and the corner of his mouth raised into a mocking smile. Suddenly exerting force, the Chibaku Tensei in the sky was also pulled, and the irresistible gravitational force spread out, and the dark sphere became darker, and the range of the gravitational force covered the ground within hundreds of kilometers. Everything contained the momentum of collapse. The unsightly black sphere shot down with a majestic repulsive force, and the endless space and time instantly changed shape, and in a trance, it seemed to have come to the depths of the universe, and everywhere was full of endless gravitational force, and there was no way to advance or retreat. Even the flames of the previous Baijidama explosion were directly swallowed by the gravitational force, and all of them were attracted to the sky by the Chibaku Tensei. Bastard, this guy is good at calculating. Perceiving the changes in the outside world, Obito's face changed dramatically, and he stared at the 15 black spheres in the sky, and his face turned blue in an instant. In the face of 15 Chibaku Tensei, no one could be relieved. But his eye power is strong, and so is that chakra. The scale of 15 Chibaku Tensei is not a joke. The eye power of Rinnegan must meet the requirements. In addition, the chakra contained in the body is extremely demanding, and in the case of insufficient chakra, it will consume vitality. On the other hand, Dustless was relaxed and calm, and he didn't look like chakra at all. It also showed how strong Dustless's chakra was. In fact, what Obito didn't know was that controlling 15 Chibaku Tensei at once, even Dustless was mentally exhausted. He didn't have a cheat like the Jubi in his body, and he relied entirely on his own chakra to consume Obito. But, how can you succeed, especially this technique is full of loopholes? Staring at Dustless with a sneer, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He also had Rinnegan, so he naturally knew where the weakness of Chibaku Tensei was. As long as the black sphere is destroyed, everything will be back to normal. Obito said calmly. He was not afraid of these black spheres. Do you think I'll give you a chance to attack them? Looking at Obito with a sneer, Dustless's face was full of disapproval. It was true that Obito knew the weakness of Chibaku Tensei, but the premise was that he had the opportunity to destroy them one by one. Ha! With Dustless's order, his palms suddenly closed together, and the Rinnegan once again burst out with even more powerful eye power, and the black ball in the sky suddenly emitted a demonic brilliance, becoming even deeper and darker, and the gravitational force it emitted was several times stronger than before. Caw caw caw, the ground that was riddled with holes cracked again, and the earth and mountains quickly collapsed into broken walls. The scale reached the range of 15 Chibaku Tensei, and the gravitational force instantly increased by 100 times, and the affected area was unprecedentedly vast. The whole earth slowly rose, and even the giant mountain that was thousands of meters long was swallowed by the absolute gravitational force of 15 Chibaku Tensei. Obito was the focus of Dustless's attention, and he was directly sucked into the sky. Explode for me. His fingers suddenly flashed a black iron rod, and staring at the several dark spheres, Obito threw the black iron rod in his hand into the sky, and went straight toward the Chibaku Tensei. Boom boom boom, the iron rod inevitably hit the black sphere, and the void suddenly swept a blazing flame, causing a chain reaction, and several Chibaku Tensei not far away were also detonated. Obito easily destroyed 6 Chibaku Tensei. The earth that was pulled by 6 Chibaku Tensei fell back to the ground. At this moment, Obito turned into a savior, and helped the devastated earth, and all the floating soil in the air fell to the ground. And Dustless, who was controlling the Chibaku Tensei, undoubtedly became the devil, the mastermind of tearing the earth. Boom boom boom, a few more black iron rods were thrown out, and 6 more Chibaku Tensei exploded, and the black smoke burned to every corner of the sky. In this way, it's easy to control them. Dustless stared at the remaining Chibaku Tensei in the sky and nodded slightly. He was not angry, but smiled. It's good to have a lot of power, but it's not easy to control at the same time, and the power is not concentrated enough. There are only 3 Chibaku Tensei left, and it's much easier to control, and the power can be more condensed. And most importantly, Dustless is not Uchiha Madara, the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, and chakra is almost unlimited, so it also reduces the burden on chakra. Buzz buzz buzz, 13 of the 15 Chibaku Tensei were destroyed, and it's reasonable to say that the range of gravity should be reduced, but the fact is the opposite. The restraint of gravity did not reduce, but expanded a lot. Even the range of the Chibaku Tensei is more vast than the previous 15. Looking up, the remaining 3 Chibaku Tensei are strangely fused together. Is this the ability of his left eye? Chibaku Tensei can be controlled like this. Staring at the 3 fused Chibaku Tensei in surprise, Obito couldn't help but take a deep breath, and his face was heavy. He didn't expect Dustless to have such a means, and he can control the Chibaku Tensei that has been released. Boom boom boom, the giant mountain that fell to the ground before began to float again, and its speed was much faster, completely ignoring the existence of gravity, and went straight to the dark sphere that became bigger after the fusion. Caw caw caw, the mountain debris that came from all sides in the sky quickly condensed, and soon buried the dark sphere, and it was tightly wrapped by countless stones, and disappeared. Don't even think about it. Struggling with his body, and using all his strength to get rid of the discomfort caused by gravity, at the critical moment, a black pearl suddenly floated out from behind Obito, and changed it into a sharp kunai according to his will, and threw it at the small sphere that was about to be buried, hoping to blow it up. A kunai made of truth-seeking jade. Do you really put me in your eyes, Obito? Dustless, who has excellent eyesight, naturally saw the kunai flying out, and at the moment, he just sneered, and at the same time, the rinnegan of his left eye locked on the kunai made of truth-seeking jade. The purple rinnegan of rinnegan surged with cold air, and the 9 black tomo hanging on it also swayed, and the focus of the line of sight was the dark kunai. Dustless's eye power suddenly began to riot, and his pupils widened, and he shouted, "Mahabharata!" Boom! In the void, an unparalleled repulsive force suddenly exploded, and the kunai made of truth-seeking jade was directly swallowed, without any resistance. The repulsive force was directly shattered. The invincible truth-seeking jade felt quite fragile at this moment. Dustless smiled slightly when he saw this. His Mahabharata and Madara's Tomb of Samsara, border prison, are indeed very similar, but there are essential differences. As long as someone has the 6 paths senjutsu, they can still perceive the existence of the shadow, but his Mahabharata can't be defended at all, and it can't be sensed at all. In short, both techniques have their own advantages and disadvantages. Just a canary in a cage, you want to escape after entering the cage. Dream on. Staring at Obito, who was still trying to escape under the gravitational restraint of Chibaku Tensei, Dustless sneered again and again, and he even wanted to escape. It's really a fool's dream. Hee hee, His palms closed again, and Dustless's momentum rose to the limit, and chakra was desperately leaking out, swallowing everything around it. As Dustless's strength increased, the Chibaku Tensei, fused with 3 black spheres, became more ferocious, and directly pulled the struggling Obito over and sealed him inside the Chibaku Tensei, forever. In the sky, an unprecedented giant sphere floated, no different from the moon. Phew. Finally done. No, this is not the end. Dustless sat on the ground without caring about his image, and looked up at the giant sphere, gasping for breath. After a moment of rest, Dustless stood up again, and he knew that this was not the end. The practice must be to kill the opponent, and this was just a simple action of sealing Obito, not killing him. Moreover, Dustless didn't think that the ordinary Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito's movements. Although it was a fusion of 3 high-density chakra energy spheres, and it was powerful, but in the end, it was still an ordinary Chibaku Tensei, and its power was far less than the strongest sealing technique, 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei. Sure enough, some cracks appeared on the giant meteorite suspended in mid-air. It was not obvious yet, but it quickly spread around, and the cracks spread quickly like ripples in the water. I'll take this opportunity to kill you. Looking up at the cracks on the meteorite, Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his right arm gently waved forward, and the green prayer beads behind him moved forward, wandering in front of him, and circling around Dustless. I can only use the truth-seeking ball to erase you. After that, the hesitation in his eyes disappeared, and his eyes flashed with determination. At the same time, the green prayer beads slowly condensed, and several prayer beads gathered in front of Dustless, and continued to compress and condense, and a moment later, a black sphere was formed, Kensusunu. The evil materialized golden chakra broke out of his body, and layers of golden skeletons piled up, and the vast body crushed the entire sky, and the endless sky was bathed in golden luster. Not enough, condense. Dustless slightly raised his eyes, and after noticing that Kensusanu's body was very small, in fact, it was already very big, he frowned slightly, and a cold light gathered in his eyes, and soon after, chakra erupted again. A simple golden armor condensed from the bottom of Kensusanu's feet, and it draped up layer by layer, and continued to extend, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the giant skeletons, and finally the head, and the mask that formed the long nose of the hideous armor. It was Dustless's complete Kensusanu. This was not the end. Dustless's body quickly overflowed with a huge amount of natural chakra, and mysterious golden charms poured into the complete Kensusanu's body. His height, which had stopped growing, actually began to grow once again. The earth also began to tremble. Immortal technique, Kensusanu. Ao. It was as if it had been given life. The 500 to 600 feet tall giant looked up to the sky in anger. The airwaves that came out of its mouth directly crushed the rolling clouds. It expressed the satisfaction in its heart, and the whole earth was buzzing and trembling. Looking closely, one could see that the complete Kensusanu was different, and at this moment, it was holding a weapon that had never been seen before, and it was obviously of an unknown age, and there were traces of the vicissitudes of time on it. Chapter 284. Looking around, Susanu's head reached the sky and its feet were firmly planted on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, and its whole body was filled with ancient decaying aura. Its scarlet eyes were glaring at the void in front of it, revealing a blazing fighting spirit. The complete body Susanu, which contained the senjutsu, revealed its sharpness. Its whole body was surrounded by an invincible aura, and its imposing manner was magnificent. It was like an ancient war god that came out of a space-time tunnel, full of ancient charm. The vicissitudes of life on its body was silently telling that even the irresistible power of time couldn't erode it. And the weapon in Kensusanu's hand was unheard of, never seen before. Dustless had never used it in his previous battles, but looking at its shape, it should be a bow and arrow. Of course, there were also people who recognized it, If Uchiha Sasuke was here, he would exclaim, "Who the hell touched my precious spiritual bow?" When Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke, he naturally took everything from him, including his ability, Kansusanu's weapon, and many other resources. It's time to end it. Looking at the giant meteorite in the sky that had collapsed, Dustless's mouth gently rose, outlining a relaxed smile. This blow will completely kill Obito, this annoying cockroach that can't be killed. Caw caw caw. The dust piled up into grains fell from the sky and fell heavily on the ground, smashing countless deep pits, like the surface of the moon, with uneven surface layers. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the black spiral sword that penetrated the giant meteorite. It was the heavenly swamp spear used by the sage of the six paths in the past. Jubi, Jubi, the only thing I lack now is you. Wait for me, I will take you away soon. Dustless's eyes turned into a dazzling light, the tone of his voice was full of confidence, as if he could defeat Obito. Looking up, Senjutsu, complete body Susanoo suddenly raised its thick and powerful arm, and its strong right arm was holding a spiritual bow, aiming at the inside of Chibaku Tensei where Uchiha Obito was. Let me show you one of my strongest moves. After that, Dustless's sneer became deeper and more obvious. At the same time, he gently waved his arm, and a black sphere appeared, quietly floating in front of Dustless, swaying gently. The black sphere was particularly mysterious. The dark halo revealed the most ancient evil, as if it was a super-existence before the world was created, and it was the mastermind behind the destruction of the world. This is the horror of truth-seeking ball. It can easily create and destroy the world, and it is also one of the capital of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Dustless's body didn't have the Jubi, nor the nine-tailed beast chakra. The reason why he could use truth-seeking ball was because of the blessing of Tenseigan. Of course, all of this originated from Otsutsuki Haruo, the peerless woman. In his heart, he missed Otsutsuki Yuluo a little more. Thinking of that graceful and smiling face, as well as the cute little dimples hanging on her pretty face, Wu Chen's heart was particularly satisfied. Even if Yuluo often threw tantrums with him, she was content and knew when to advance and retreat. What else can I ask for in life? The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Dustless clenched his fists, and at the same time, the truth-seeking ball in front of him shattered, turning into countless black ink floating in the air. Dustless gently waved his hand, and the dense black ink fell on Kansusanu's bowstring. Annihilation between heaven and earth without a trace is really the most suitable way for you to die, Obito. Staring at the gradually collapsing meteorite, and the spiral sword that had already poked its head out, Dustless sneered again and again. The sight in his pupils suddenly solidified, and the momentum of his whole body tightened. Condense for me. As Dustless's voice fell, the dark ink gathered on the black spirit bow suddenly condensed, quickly shrank, and turned into a black arrow of several feet long. Kansusanu's left arm picked up the arrow condensed from the truth-seeking ball, pulled the bowstring to the maximum extent, and aimed directly at Obito, who was about to break out of the seal. Truth-seeking ball is a black jade that contains all the properties of the 5 elements of yin and yang. It transcends the Kekkei Genkai limit and Kekkei Genkai, and any matter that comes in contact with it will completely collapse. Therefore, Obito will undoubtedly die if he is shot by the arrow. Kakaka, the giant meteorite continued to peel off, and the huge meteorite fragments continued to fall to the ground, smashing countless deep pits, and the spiral black sword became more and more obvious. Dustless, who had excellent vision, even saw Obito intact. As expected of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, he's really strong. Although Dustless didn't think that Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito, he didn't expect him to break out of the seal so easily, and it didn't cause any damage to him at all. But, his voice quickly became cold, and Dustless's face overflowed with hostility, and his murderous aura began to go out of control. At the same time, Kansusanu tightened the bowstring again, and the sharp black arrow was aimed directly at Obito's abdomen. I'll kill you now. With a grim smile, Kansusanu's arm that was pulling the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the powerful force directly bounced the black arrow out of the truth-seeking ball. the target was Obito's heart. For people like Uchiha Obito, Dustless will never be merciful, whether it's the one in the system or the Uchiha Obito in the outside world. As long as there's a chance or when he's no longer useful, he will kill this kind of person who has weak will and is easy to collapse under the influence of mouth release. Simply compared to the enemy, sometimes the teammate who cheats the teammate is often much more threatening than the enemy. Especially Obito's sweetheart Noera Rin, who was killed by Dustless. Once he learns the truth, there's no doubt that this kid will madly retaliate against Dustless at all costs. Chapter 285. Dustless hated people who were not firm in their beliefs and always liked to waver. Obito was such a person, and naturally, he was also the target of his hatred. Therefore, whether it was the Obito in the system or the Obito in the outside world, if one day he really became an enemy, Dustless would definitely not hesitate to kill him with his sword. His strength is really strong. Even now I am not his opponent. In the dark space, Obito secretly murmured, and his heart was filled with emotion and fear. He thought that he had obtained the power to fight with the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten by Dustless without any power to fight back. In particular, the powerful move from before was still lingering in his mind, and the shadow left by it could not be waved away in a short time. I can only rely on the endless chakra to fight with him, so that I have the hope of winning. With a flash of light in his eyes, Obito secretly decided. Dustless's pure physical attack was much stronger than his, and even the two were not on the same level. Dustless knew almost all the moves that Obito knew, but Dustless knew the moves that Obito knew, let alone know, he did not even know how to understand them. In fact, when Obito said these words, his heart was also extremely bitter. The dignified Jinchuriki of the Ten-Tailed, and he thought that he was on the same level as the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten to the point where he could only passively defend. It was ridiculous to use the strategy of supporting. But the final winner is still me. The complexity in his eyes quickly converged and turned into endless indifference. His Rinnegan flashed with endless cold light, and Obito also put away the spiral sword in his hand. His cold eyes looked around the gradually peeling Chibaku Tensei. Obito's face was cold, his hands spread out, and his Rinnegan surged with endless strong repulsion. Boom boom boom, the invisible repulsive force spread out in all directions, crushing the surrounding rubble into powder. The huge Chibaku Tensei collapsed at an even more terrifying speed. Even Obito inside could vaguely see the clear sky outside. Boom boom boom. When Obito was about to completely crush the Chibaku Tensei, there was a sudden roar in front of him. The strong energy wave made him slightly stunned, and the mound under his feet trembled. Suddenly, an unprecedented sense of crisis welled up in his heart. Without hesitation, Obito controlled the truth-seeking ball and turned it into a circular black barrier in front of him. Puchi, at this moment, a sharp black iron spear suddenly penetrated the solid Chibaku Tensei, and appeared like a ghost. The straight tip of the arrow pulsed with a dark light, and anything that came in contact with it would vanish into thin air. Not good. Obito looked at the black iron spear that appeared out of thin air in astonishment. He could feel the horror of the arrow, and the essence of its power coincided with his truth-seeking ball. Immediately, he worked even harder to reinforce the barrier in front of him. Obito wanted to use his Kamui to avoid the dark arrow, but because of the sudden appearance, there was not enough time to use Kamui to dodge his body. So, he just frantically reinforced the barrier in front of him, and that was all he could do. He hoped to resist the powerful attack of the black arrow and ensure his safety. But even if the ideal was beautiful, the reality was cruel. Kacha. Puchi, the moment the black enchantment came into contact with the arrow, it shattered and was immediately pierced through mercilessly. The tip of the arrow that was shining with black light directly pierced into Obito's chest. The tyrannical force directly nailed him to the rock wall. Dustless's painstaking attack took a long time. The previous, Chibaku Tensei, was just to pave the way for him. Now, he was caught off guard and attacked suddenly. Naturally, Obito was not aware of it and was directly killed. After all, the difference in strength between the two was obvious. Compared to the poor Obito, Dustless could be said to be a real super nouveau riche, with all kinds of incredible Kekkei Genkai and thousands of abilities. It's over, Obito. Dustless turned into a photon and appeared next to Obito. His cold voice sounded, and he could clearly see that Obito's body was slowly collapsing. Even the abnormal recovery ability of the Jubi could not repair it completely. This was the horror of the truth-seeking Jade, it was simply irresistible. Just like the two opposite attributes of water and fire, once it came into contact with water, the fire attribute would naturally be extinguished. To some extent, the truth-seeking Jade was like the ultimate existence that destroyed the world, and ordinary people could not resist it at all. It's finally over. After a while, Obito's body completely dissipated, and his breath disappeared. Dustless was relieved and sat down casually. His back was bent, his eyes were dim, and his face was extremely pale. His whole person seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. Just now, after a series of fierce battles, Dustless consumed a lot of chakra in his body. If he couldn't kill Obito with that blow, then the one who would be killed would be Dustless. There was no other reason. Dustless did not have the existence of a bug like the Jubi. If he did, he would have unlimited chakra and could fight with Obito with all kinds of ninjutsu. The training is over. The figure of Obito that collapsed before gathered again, and Dustless was shocked. After hearing the light voice, his tense nerves relaxed. Looking at the elegant girl in front of him, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief, and immediately asked with eagerness and expectation, "Obito has been killed by me, my body." The words in his mouth stopped abruptly, and Dustless suddenly found that the empty chakra in his body was soaring at a speed that had never been seen before. At the same time, his body was also changing unconsciously. The hardness of his body and spiritual power were more than 100 times stronger, and his abilities in all aspects were much stronger. The dim eyes regained their luster, and Dustless instantly became 100 times more energetic. Chapter 286. Carefully savoring the changes in his body, Dustless choked with emotion. Especially when he sensed the vast and majestic chakra, his face showed a look of astonishment and joy. After taking a deep breath, he tried to keep his heart calm, but the corners of his eyes were still twitching slightly. This proved that Dustless's heart was not calm. It was like a shocking wave in a storm. What a terrifying amount! Is this the ancestor level of chakra? Slightly opening his eyes, Dustless was secretly shocked. The chakra in his body was almost limitless, like an inexhaustible sea. This carefree feeling made Dustless extremely comfortable, as if he was in the depths of the clouds. His whole body was floating. The rock hidden in the bottom of his heart also disappeared. His body was exceptionally refreshed, and the unprecedented pleasure made him unable to stop. But even with such a chakra content and a strong body, Kaguya seems to be no match for her enemy. She had to use infinite Tsukuyomi to create her own soldiers, white Zetsu. What a magical world with all kinds of forms. Suddenly recalling the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of, Dustless's heart inevitably sank. His current strength was still not comparable to Kaguya, and the enemy that Kaguya was once afraid of was 10 times stronger than him. Comparisons are odious, I can't compare. Laughing at himself, Dustless said bitterly. His eyes were filled with loneliness, lying on the ground and looking at the blue sky with lifeless eyes. As the saying goes, there is always a mountain beyond a man. The world in front of him is just an ordinary side of countless universes. In the two-dimensional world where gods fly everywhere, this world is nothing at all. Especially according to the memory that Dustless extracted from Wang Liang last time, the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of did not seem to belong to this world, and even Kaguya herself came from another place. In the end, Kaguya herself was also a thief who stole the power of the divine tree. It's rare to see you so sentimental. A black shadow covered the sky, and a cold voice entered his ears. Dustless, who was in a trance, came back to his senses. Staring at the exquisite and perfect face, Dustless's muddled expression became clear. What he saw was Ling, the embodiment of the consciousness of the system. No matter how strong you are, there will always be someone stronger. Humans are always vigilant in times of peace, and I am no exception. Sighing, Dustless shrugged and said helplessly, "You're the system's incarnation. Naturally, you wouldn't understand how I feel. Anyone would feel depressed if there was a guillotine hanging over their head." Whether it was Huey or his so-called enemy, they were both untouchable existences. "And didn't I take everything from Obito, including the Jubi in his body? But I can't summon the strongest tailed beast, the Jubi. You're cheating your customers, and you'll go to jail." Dustless looked at the perfect face snappily. Facing Ling-er's indifferent gaze, he groaned in dissatisfaction. His tone was strange, and he always felt that Ling-er was deliberately tricking him. He only got the Jubi's chakra, strong physique, and vitality. As if amused by Dustless's strange voice, Ling-er's iceberg face bloomed with a rare smile, and the soul-stirring arc made Dustless gulp. "You're really whimsical. You've already got everything from the tailed beast, and you still want the Jubi. If you don't wake up from your dream, I don't mind helping you wake up." Ling-er's beautiful and lively eyes stared at Dustless, blinking, and said with a smile, "That's fine." Dustless's mouth twitched without a trace. He still can't forget the bitter years when he was beaten by Ling-er. Even if he now has the strength to contend with the gods, Dustless won't be stupid enough to think that he is Ling-er's opponent. The existence of the system is a manifestation of escaping the will of the world. Ling-er, who is not bound by the law, is naturally unprecedented. She can transform into any character at will, and defeating the opponent can give Dustless the ability to train the character. Thinking about it, one can know how terrible it is. In fact, Dustless also knows that he is greedy. After all, he inherited most of the abilities except that he can't transform into the god tree, Jubi. If he can summon the Jubi, it's unscientific. Ta-ta-ta. In the gloomy underground laboratory, there was a heavy and oppressive sound of footsteps, and in the dark corridor tunnel, it was even colder. Vaguely, it was a handsome black-haired boy, with messy hair and a strong body, with a Kusanagi sword on his waist, and the invisible aura he exuded was even more terrible. It was Uchiha Sasuke. More than half a month has passed since the last incident. Sasuke wanted to kill Orochimaru and leave Odogekure. However, when he woke up from a coma, there was only a large white snake beside him. In fact, Orochimaru's clone had already sneaked into Sasuke's body, but he didn't know it. Sasuke, who realized that the strength gap between him and Dustless was too big, began to look for his companions. After all, Dustless and Itachi's strength were so untouchable, but they both had their own companions. He must do the same, swearing that he can't lose to the two rivals in any way. It was precisely because of Dustless's overwhelming strength that Sasuke uncharacteristically looked for his companions. The unfathomable strength of Dustless and Itachi shrouded him like a nightmare. Every time he slept, he seemed to be ridiculed by Itachi and Dustless. It was impossible for him to fight alone to surpass these two people, so he had to rely on the strength of others. It was also because of the relationship with Dustless that Sasuke attached great importance to the so-called companions. It should be here. The world in front of him suddenly turned into a giant laboratory. Staring at the giant pool in front of him, Sasuke slowly walked over and looked at the stagnant water in the pool expressionlessly. The stagnant water in the pool rippled as if it had sensed that someone was approaching. "It's time to show up, Suigetsu." Chapter 287. Now that Orochimaru has disappeared, Sasuke will naturally ruthlessly plunder his legacy, or simply plunder his subordinates. Although he doesn't like Orochimaru, it's undeniable that Orochimaru's subordinates are the elites of the elites. You can come here, indicating that you have defeated Orochimaru. You deserve to be called Sasuke. In the pool, the ripples suddenly became even more rapid. A man with a head full of silver hair walked out of the pool. He had jagged fangs. It's Hozuki Suigetsu. Otogakure is Orochimaru's territory. Since Sasuke confined him unscrupulously, it means that Orochimaru, the biggest obstacle, has been removed. That guy is missing. Whether he's dead or alive has nothing to do with me. Throwing the prepared clothes to Ghost Tsuki, Sasuke's voice was extremely indifferent. Regardless of the former's actions, he simply left. In short, there's no need to care about Orochimaru anymore. Even if he can come back from the dead, I will let him die again. In the dark space full of various containers, only Sasuke's cold voice was left. His current purpose is to gather enough companions, and then start on the Akatsuki. To end the lives of those two bastards. The morning breeze was mighty, the air was fresh, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. Under the waterfall, the golden figure was training hard. Sweat stains had shredded his clothes, and several tanuki beards on both sides of his face were hanging with crystal drops. Damn, it's because I'm too weak. The golden-haired youth fiercely threw out the energy ball in his hand. The waterfall in front of him made a rumbling sound, and the water splashed all over the youth's body like a rainstorm. His deep blue eyes were filled with shock, murderous intent, and self-blame. The cold spring water soaked the blonde boy's body, and it seemed that only this could calm the anger in his heart. Naruto, I can understand your feelings. Yamato, who temporarily led Team 7's Umbu team, rushed over. After carefully observing Uzumaki Naruto, he was relieved. He patted Naruto's shoulder and comforted, Sasuke defeated you because he used Orochimaru's evil jutsu. There's no need to take this kind of thing to heart. Evil can't prevail over good. In the end, you will surpass him. Yamato sighed. His words revealed a sense of helplessness. Whether it was good or bad, it was the motivation for people to become strong. At the same time, it was also where the devil's barrier lay. After the last incident, after Dustless and Zetsu left, Naruto also rushed to the scene in time, but he was still easily defeated by Sasuke. The two seemed to be in different dimensions, and they had no power to fight back. I'm not as good as Sasuke, Naruto took a deep breath and said with a complicated tone. If he was a little stronger, he could capture Sasuke with brute force. Sasuke and Naruto were not only teammates, but also competitors. After working hard for so many years, Naruto was not as good as Sasuke. Naturally, Naruto was unwilling. It's not your fault. Staring at Naruto's unwilling face, Yamato gently shook his head and said earnestly, hoping that Naruto's obsession with Sasuke wouldn't be too deep. After all, Sasuke has a blood feud, and he can't be abandoned. Captain Yamato. After reorganizing his words, Yamato was about to persuade Naruto wholeheartedly when several figures suddenly fell from the sky, wearing black coats and Umbu masks of different shapes. Naturally, Konoha's Umbu could dress like this. The 5th Hokage ordered you to go to his office. There is a task for the 7th team. Several Umbu ninjas' tone was quite respectful. Yamato's status in the Umbu was not low, and he deserved their respect. Hearing this, Yamato's brows deeply frowned. He was quite worried. If it was an ordinary task, he might have already arranged for other ninjas to carry it out. The 7th team, which he was temporarily leading, naturally showed the seriousness of the task. Although Naruto has made some small achievements in his practice, he still has a long way to go. He needs more time to break in. It's too early to put Naruto on the mission in such a hurry. It will be over soon. You can go back first. Although he was dissatisfied, Yamato didn't dare to say it in front of these people. After all, the Hokage's face still needs to be taken care of. He can ask the fifth Hokage face to face. Several Umbu nodded slightly, and immediately their bodies lost their texture and disappeared in an instant. These Umbu ninjas were the elites of Konoha, and their strength was the best of the best. About half a quarter of an hour later, in the Hokage's office. The current Hokage was naturally the fifth Hokage, Tsunade Senju. Although she didn't like being the Hokage, under Naruto's words, she could only bow down and willingly tie herself to Konoha's war chariot. Dustless, is this your choice? Looking at the peaceful village, Tsunade's eyes were full of complicated feelings. Her thoughts turned back, and it seemed that she went back to the days when they formed a team to fight against the Rock Village. The smiling face that always had a smile, once again came into view across time and space. Creak, the office door was gently pushed open, and Tsunade's thoughts were pulled back. She saw Yamato and several members of the seventh team. Hokage-sama. Yamato frowned and whispered. For a moment, he clearly saw the worry in Tsunade's eyes. He didn't have to think about it. Something unexpected must have happened. Kakashi's temporary 10th team encountered the two members of the Akatsuki organization. The situation seems to be bad, and we need your support. The enemy should be the one who killed Asuma last time. After seeing the members of the 7th team arrive, Tsunade showed unprecedented decisiveness and ability. Without any nonsense, she went straight to the topic. It turned out that Asuma, the sensei who led the 10th team, was killed by the Akatsuki. The enemy was Haiden and Kakuzu. Chapter 288. Senju Tsunade was already in her 40s or 50s. Her skin was still very delicate, her face was smooth, and her body sometimes exuded a mature aura, giving people a feeling of a cool breeze. It made people relax involuntarily, and their anxious hearts gradually eased and settled down. As a leader, not only does she need a calm heart and absolute judgment, but she also needs the courage to stabilize the internal situation and be able to turn the muzzle at the critical moment. If even his own people can't calm him down, then this Hokage is undoubtedly a failure. Although Senju Tsunade looked a bit brainless, she was definitely a competent Hokage. She understood what it meant to stabilize the internal situation before resisting the external situation, and knew how to use it reasonably. This time, I will tear them into pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. After hearing the Akatsuki's words, Uzumaki Naruto's eyes immediately turned red, and said with a murderous aura, causing the surrounding air to drop to the freezing point. Due to the appearance of Dustless, Naruto hated this organization very much. It can even be said that he drank their blood and ate their flesh. Naruto, you are a ninja. You can't be controlled by your emotions. As a ninja, you can't perform tasks according to your emotions at any time. Seeing this, Yamato frowned, and his eyes flashed with displeasure. When he was about to reprimand Naruto, he fell silent after seeing the indignation in his eyes. It was difficult for him to speak. It doesn't matter. The task this time is to tear the enemy into pieces. Senju Tsunade showed an unusual indifference, and her expression was unusually ferocious. The Akatsuki was full of all kinds of S-class rebellious ninjas. They were used to doing bad things. It was impossible to make them turn back. There was no need to be kind to this kind of person, just tear him apart like a beast. Hokage, forget it, I don't need to worry about this kind of thing. Yamato intended to persuade Tsunade, but he was repulsed by her ferocious eyes. He could only smile bitterly, and the melancholy in his heart disappeared. Perhaps, as Tsunade said, the enemy this time is the kind of ruthless and bloodthirsty. They only need to pay attention to the most simple and direct violence. Tear the enemy into pieces. Naruto. Haruno Sakura looked at Uzumaki Naruto with a complicated expression. Her gem-like eyes dimmed, and she felt extremely guilty. Compared to Naruto and Sasuke, she has been dragging the team behind. She clenched her fists tightly, and at the same time, she looked firmly at Tsunade. Tsunade was now her master. On the other hand, the pale-skinned Sasai was expressionless and looked very calm. He, Naruto, and Haruno Sakura had already buried the hatchet. But in his heart, he still had doubts about the so-called fetters. It's no wonder that Sasai has such an idea. He joined the Root clan since he was a child. It can be said that he has witnessed the ugliness of human nature. It's too difficult for him to integrate into the relationship between Sasuke and Naruto. Recognition did not mean that they could abandon the gap between them. All of this required time to get used to each other. That's the only way. Yamato shook his head. He was also aware of the contradictions of the new Team 7. Although they had already severed their rivalry with each other, the fundamental problem was still there. Only the heavens knew if they would be able to work together intimately. Inside the brightly lit room, a round table was filled with delicious delicacies. Hot air billowed from the food, and a rich aroma wafted out from the food. Oh! Is it my illusion? A frivolous and surprised voice rang out, and a young man in a white robe stepped in. He lifted his nose and sniffed the fragrance in the air without caring about his image. Looking at the dazzling array of dishes on the table, his eyes lit up and his fingers moved. He directly appeared in front of the table in a flash. He didn't even pick up the chopsticks, he just reached out and grabbed them, paw. A beautiful figure rushed over and mercilessly left a dark red handprint on Dustless's hand. She stared at Dustless and said with disdain, "In the past, the Uchiha were also a top noble clan. As the son of the patriarch, you don't even know etiquette. I'm really worried about your parents." While scolding Dustless, Yuluo was always so elegant. Her white legs were exposed, and she stood there gracefully, showing the temperament that a lady should have. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have that kind of noble temperament. I'm the king of grass in troubled times." Dustless stared at Yuluo and said with dissatisfaction, "And the master of this family should be me." However, when the word parents was mentioned, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of sadness. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku were saved by him using the outer path, Rinsei Tensei. It has been several years since they last saw each other. I think they are also living in seclusion. Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to pay attention to them. As long as their lives are not in danger, everything is fine. Living freely in seclusion is also not a bad thing. "Sit down, we can't leave you out, Red Lotus." Pulling the slender Hinata over, Yuluo greeted Red Lotus, who was quite reserved, and motioned her to come and sit down. After all, this table of delicacies was prepared by her. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he heard this. In a trance, he thought that this was a snake dinner. "Sit down, Red Lotus, we are all family, there is no need to be so concerned." With a gentle smile, Dustless said very casually. Although he verbally said that Red Lotus was his subordinate, in fact, he has already regarded her as a close existence similar to family. Seeing Dustless speak, Red Lotus struggled for a while and sat down obediently. In the spacious room, the cool evening breeze blew, and the four people ate their dinner peacefully. Of course, compared to Dustless who was wolfing down the food, the other three women's behavior was much more elegant. Chapter 289. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Dustless hugged Yuluo and disappeared. Hinata and Red Lotus blushed. They didn't need to be said to know what it meant. Women in this world matured much earlier. Some things were understood at the age of 12 or 13. After eating and drinking, one would think about sex. This didn't need to be explained, even the young Hinata understood what it meant. Red Lotus looked at Dustless thoughtfully. Although Yuluo's face was full of struggle, and she was beating Dustless fiercely, trying to show a reluctant look, her inner joy could still be seen. As for why she could see the joy in her heart, there was no other reason, it was all a woman's natural intuition. He had to say that this little girl was very concerned about her face, especially in front of Hinata and Red Lotus. She deliberately maintained her reserve, which made Dustless couldn't help but have the idea of teasing Yuluo. Yuluo-sama and Dustless-sama are a good match, very, her bright and resplendent eyes dimmed. Even though Yuluo had never mentioned her origins, it wasn't hard to tell that Yuluo's family background wasn't ordinary from her aura, her self-cultivation, and the pressure that came from being in a high position for a long time. Dustless was the eldest son of the former Uchiha clan's patriarch, and his strength was unprecedented, so the two were naturally well-matched. Red Lotus, Neisan is really cunning. Although she was young, Hinata wasn't the kind of girl who knew everything. She had followed Yuluo for many years, and she already knew a lot of ancient secrets. She was no longer the simple and ignorant Hyuga Hinata, and her mind had changed a lot. As for Uzumaki Naruto, when talking about him, Hinata's expression was slightly calm, and even hid a little indifference. Red Lotus glanced at Hinata angrily and didn't say much. She silently watched the two leave, and her shining eyes obviously dimmed, staring at the untouchable moon hanging high in the sky. Red Lotus's eyes dimmed even more. She was alone, and it was particularly bleak. In fact, as Hinata and Red Lotus imagined, Dustless and Yuluo did have a fierce time, and it wasn't until late in the afternoon that the creaking sound stopped. "What kind of monster are you? Your physical strength is so strong." Deep in the midnight, Yuluo stared at Dustless and tried to stand up. The tingling pain from her lower body made her pretty face pale. She stared at him angrily, and her cheeks bulged, and she rolled her eyes, which was very cute. However, Dustless ignored Yuluo, and his words directly made her vomit blood. "We're already an old couple, why are you still pretending to be pure? Anyway, I don't buy it." Wuchen curled his lips and said with extreme disdain. He had not forgotten Yuluo's appearance earlier. His expression suddenly returned to normal, and he said, "Has there been any movement from Black Setsu recently? If there's one person that Dustless is most worried about, it's undoubtedly Black Setsu. This old guy is shrouded in mystery, and he's very mysterious. Although his strength performance is not satisfactory, he doesn't know if he has any powerful life-saving cards." Seeing Dustless talking about business, Yuluo's expression also returned to normal, and she said in a deep voice, "He's been very stable recently, obeying Pain's orders all day long, and he's also very honest. He didn't show his fierce fangs, and he knows his place." Hearing this, Dustless shook his head. "This old guy looks harmless on the surface, but in fact, he's insidious and cunning. He always hides his sharp claws. Once the sharp claws are exposed, any creature will completely wither in front of him. Don't underestimate him. After thousands of years of precipitation, he already knows the root of the concept of human nature, so he can let the whole world live in his script, including you and me." Dustless said heavily. Black Setsu's task of calculating the heaven and earth is absolutely not to be underestimated. The thread of discussion suddenly changed, and he asked Yuluo calmly, "What about Pain's movements?" "Of course, there's also my stupid brother Uchiha Itachi." After the end of the training, Dustless calmly rested for a few days. He must know the root of the Akatsuki organization. After talking for half an hour, Yuluo explained the recent movements of Akatsuki. "Itachi's body really can't go on." A light suddenly flashed in his mind. Dustless sighed. He originally thought that with his appearance, Itachi's body wouldn't collapse so quickly, but he didn't expect this kind of thing to happen. It seems that the power of Dustless's butterfly wings is not big enough. "Did you change your expression wrongly? It shouldn't be this 'I knew it' expression." At the very least, you should pretend to be sad. Yu Luo said speechlessly as he looked at Wu Qin, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. His younger brother had a terminal illness. Even if he did not cry out loud, he should at least show some grief instead of having such an expression. Sadness. Hearing this, Dustless rolled his eyes, glanced at Yu Luo, and sneered, "That kid can't wait for me to die, so that he can remove the obstacles for Sasuke. In his eyes, he only has Sasuke, his younger brother, and doesn't take me, his elder brother, to heart. He's just on guard." Dustless shook his head. Itachi treated everyone well, but he didn't like his elder brother, and even secretly guarded against him all day long. "It's because you're too dangerous, you can't blame others." Yu Luo was very open-minded, and seemed to understand why Itachi was on guard against Dustless. In the face of the sea monsters with fangs lurking in the deep sea, if they weren't careful, they would be the last ones to be swallowed. Am I so terrible? Looking at Yu Luo with a wry smile, Dustless was too lazy to explain. He also felt that he wasn't a good person, but so what, instead of being a hypocrite who suffered a lot, Dustless felt that the identity of a peerless evil was more suitable for him. Good people don't live long, bad people live for thousands of years, this is an unchanging truth. Chapter 290. For example, a peerless evil like Otsutsuki Kagaya, even if she stole the fruit of the god tree and was sealed in the end, she was still the one who had the last laugh. From a mortal to a godlike existence, regardless of success or failure, Kagaya was already a winner in life. Therefore, Dustless also looked at the so-called justice and evil with contempt. In the dense forest, two silhouettes were walking alone. They were wearing wooden bamboo hats, and the white ribbons on the hats were all small bells. When they walked, they would make a pleasant sound. Those two zombie duo are really messing around. They deserve to be killed for violating Pain's order. Dustless and White Zetsu walked side by side, looking at the several figures in front of them, frowning slightly. The cold luster from their pupils seemed to be able to crush the void, giving the outside a terrifying gloominess. Even Dustless, who was standing beside him, felt as if he had fallen into hell at that moment. Damn, it's only been a few days, but this kid's strength seems to have improved again. Bastard, how did he do it? The corner of Heiju's mouth twitched fiercely. He cursed in his heart. Wu Chen's murderous aura left him an eternal and indelible memory. As the saying goes, a cornered dog will jump over the wall. At this moment, Black Zetsu was like an ant on a hot pan. Although his heart was particularly irritable and depressed, he still kept calm for the first time. It's not impossible to become stronger, but at least there is a limit. Becoming stronger without limit is not something normal humans can do. Even Otsutsuki Kagaya has her own limit. The casual look just now, and the uncontrollable murderous aura that leaked out made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and he couldn't help but shiver. I haven't seen you for a while, and Dustless-sama seems to be a lot stronger. In this case, our plan is more secure. Compared to Black Zetsu, who was good at playing tricks, White Zetsu was much simpler. He just hoped that the Eye of the Moon plan could be completed quickly, and then resurrected Uchiha Madara to release the Dream Jutsu to the world, Infinite Tsukimi. I don't want to wait any longer. Let's start the plan as soon as we're done. Dustless said thoughtfully as he stared at the few figures in front of him. He had also completely thrown away the restraints in his heart. Instead of waiting for death, he might as well take the initiative to attack and seize the initiative in this battle. Looking up, the people in front of him were Haiden and Kakuzu, as well as Konoha's Team 7 and Team 7. Especially Terumi Mei, who was his ally. As for the final, Infinite Tsukimi Genjutsu, it was not something Dustless could deal with, the so-called covenant didn't exist at all. In the end, the nature of this world was survival of the fittest. Since May couldn't survive, she couldn't save the Mist village. Should I get rid of all these small fries? Forget it, it's useless for small fries to live anyway. I'll just let them live on and enjoy the rest of their lives. Raising his eyelids and looking at Konoha's ninja with pity, Wu Chen sneered expressionlessly. His pupils were like an ancient well, without the emotions that a human should have. He was like a sculpture, and his body was isolated from the world. People were selfish, and Dustless was no exception. He only hoped that the people he cared about could live well. As for the life and death of others, it had nothing to do with him. I can't go on like this, I must find a way to contain this kid. The murderous light in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Black Setsu's mind was spinning rapidly. If he let Dustless continue to strengthen without limit, in the end, he wouldn't be able to defeat Dustless. Boom! 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 Violent chakra waves suddenly exploded, and strong air waves blew all the leaves in the forest. Looking up, it was the two sides that had already started fighting. At present, Konoha's ninjas were temporarily at a disadvantage. After all, Haiden and Kakuzu were both powerful ninjas, and they were able to join the Akatsuki. It doesn't seem good. We are here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kakuzu, not Konoha's ninjas. White Setsu abandoned his position and began to worry about Konoha's ninjas. Black Setsu was speechless. Shaking his head, Black Setsu was too lazy to talk nonsense. They were indeed here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kakuzu. This is very simple, if Konoha's ninjas can't do it. Just like how we killed Sasori, we will personally end their lives. A strange smile swept the corner of his mouth, and the cold light in his eyes suddenly condensed, shooting out cold light. Dustless's killing intent was awe-inspiring. As for Haiden and Kakuzu, they were originally used to capture the bijou. Now that they have all gathered, only Nibi and Kyubi are left. These S-class ninjas are insignificant. Ah! Dustless Sama is still as cold as ever, but this is a suitable way for them to die. White Setsu said with a mocking smile. Looking at the zombie duo, Kakuzu and Fei Duan, he was looking forward to seeing if these two undead guys could remain calm in front of Dustless's words. But Dustless Sama doesn't seem to have a chance to make a move. Konoha's support may have already arrived. After a long silence, White Setsu suddenly said with a tone of pity, because within his perception range, Konoha's ninjas have already arrived, and the number was not small. Dustless maintained a calm expression, and his expression didn't change. Obviously, he had already expected that Konoha's ninjas would come to support. After all, Haiden and Kakuzu were S-class ninjas, and Konoha's side was just Team 10 led by Kakashi and Asuma. Only by sending new ninjas to support can they maintain the victory. Chapter 291. The oppressive atmosphere quietly spread, and the two opposing forces were obviously in a life-and-death struggle. Even top-level powerhouses like Haiden and Kakuzu couldn't help but tense up in the face of Konoha's ninja. There is a saying that the king of hell is easy to deal with, but the little devil is difficult to deal with. What he said was not unreasonable. Team 10 was originally an intelligent ninja, and their own Haiden's brain was not very good, and his character was reckless, and he died as soon as he came on the field. However, Haiden had an immortal body, and this kind of ordinary physical attack was ineffective against him. Even if the previous attack had cut off his head, with the help of Kakuzu, he still miraculously succeeded in resurrecting. After resurrecting with full blood, Haiden's expression was extremely arrogant, and his smug smile was particularly annoying. This kid is still surprisingly annoying. Wu Chen's indifferent expression stiffened. Seeing Fei Duan being so arrogant, Wu Chen's face twitched without a trace. Fei Duan in front of him was so annoying that he couldn't help but want to beat him up. Not to mention that he killed someone else's teacher, he even showed off in front of his apprentices, which was really hateful. His ability is really weird, incredible, I can't help but want to dissect him." White Zetsu looked at Haydn with a strange light in his eyes. He was a professional zombie, and he had seen all kinds of corpses, but he had never seen an immortal like Haydn. His ability is good, but unfortunately, his death is also the most tragic. Recalling the tragic end of Haydn's dismembered body and buried alive, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. The most heaven-defying ability was also the most tragic end. Because Haydn was cursed, his body wouldn't die, so he was still alive even after being buried alive. He could only die slowly in the cave because of the stench of his body. It was self-evident how miserable his end was. Boom boom boom, a strong wave of air spread out, and a huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground that was still intact before. Haydn, a powerful humanoid beast, was not comparable to the kid of Team 10. Shadow Bind Jutsu. Seizing the opportunity, Shikamaru and Nara immediately used the Nara clan's secret technique to restrain Haydn. Due to the secrecy, of course, Haydn's own carelessness could not be ruled out. Soon, he was bound by the elongated black shadow on the ground, and his body could not move according to his will. Kakuzu frowned when he saw this. He looked at the shadow on the ground that was connected to Haydn's body with surprise. His face was full of interest. He could see Haydn's body moving uncontrollably. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru, who was sweating profusely. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru with great interest. His expression was inevitably filled with greed. This kind of technique that could control others without them knowing was a rare secret technique. "Get out of my way, Kakuzu. I can't control my body." Looking in the direction of the sound, he saw Fei Duan waving his long and narrow three-part scythe as he sped over. The cold light flashed as it cut through iron like it was mud, erasing and splitting any matter that came into contact with it. The target of the attack was Kakuzu. "You can control Haydn to attack me. It's a good bloodstain, but it's useless." Looking at Shikamaru and Nara, who was sweating profusely, Kakuzu then turned his head and stared at Haydn without fear. His expression was as usual, filled with eternal indifference. "Pay the price for your arrogance." Shikamaru and Nara's eyes were filled with killing intent. Deep in the ground, the black shadow was rushing toward Kakuzu's feet. Asuma was Shikamaru's teacher and friend. Now that he could kill the enemy with his own hands, his heart was particularly happy. Caw. When Kakuzu was about to dodge Haydn's attack, the ground under his feet suddenly cracked. The dark shadow was like a spirit snake that wrapped around his feet tightly, making him unable to move. Haydn's scythe was about to split Kakuzu into two. Hey. They can't be so useless, it's too funny to be killed like this." White Zetsu's face was full of disbelief. After seeing that Kakuzu was tightly bound, he exclaimed out loud. Kakuzu and Haydn were just teasing them. If they were killed by a group of hairy brats, the S-class ninjas would be too worthless. Black Zetsu didn't care, the other party was just a group of hairy brats. "I may disappoint you, Black Zetsu. They were really killed by this group of brats." Dustless heard this and smiled. He scoffed at Black Zetsu's words. Kakuzu and Haydn were indeed killed by Team 10 and 7, especially Haydn's death was the most tragic. Dustless looked at the zombie duo with pity. The end of these two people was already doomed. Even if Dustless didn't need to do it himself, the end result would be death. In the future, they will become a member of the Edo Tensei army. "Let's go, Zetsu." Dustless simply retracted his gaze and directly turned to leave. These two people were doomed to fall here. White Zetsu only needed to leave some clones to collect their corpses. It's a pity that this was a good show. White Zetsu reluctantly retracted his gaze and followed Dustless's footsteps. Of course, he left his clones in advance. After all, he still needs the corpses of these two people for future plans. Hiss! Dustless, who had just turned around and was about to leave, suddenly heard a faint hissing sound. Looking around, he saw a figure in a red robe standing quietly behind him. This person's attire was extremely disgusting. His skin was deathly pale, and he wore transparent glasses. His skin was like the scales of a snake, and the thick white snake behind him crawled out of his body. The hissing sound came from the snake's forked mouth. How could it be him, and he seems to have learned sage techniques? Frowning, Dustless secretly thought. The person who came was Orochimaru's former subordinate, Kabuto. Ah no, maybe now he should change his name. He should be called Kabuto. Chapter 292. At this moment, Kabuto's appearance was extremely disgusting. The crystal scales were clearly visible, his body was white, and he liked to stick out his tongue and lick his lips like Orochimaru. The dark red thick robe covered Kabuto's body, blocking the invasion of the sun, and snakes like dark and humid places, and Kabuto doesn't like to live in the sun. There is a road to heaven, but you don't walk. There is no door to hell. You have a lot of courage, the subordinates of a traitor, and you dare to come to the door. You have a lot of courage. After seeing the figure hidden under the robe, Black Zetsu's face changed dramatically, and after staring at Kabuto for a long time, he said with a strange smile, "Poor Orochimaru calculated for a lifetime, and in the end, it was easy for you. It's really ironic." The success and failure of Orochimaru came from the hands of Kabuto. I'm afraid that Orochimaru didn't expect that everything he did in his life was for others. This old guy is really good at acting. It's a pity that the Best Actor award is not given to him. Wuchen secretly glanced at Heiju and secretly smacked his tongue. Black Zetsu was a natural performer, deceiving people all over the world, whether it was acting or the essence of the performance. He played the skills of an actor incisively and vividly. Perhaps in front of Dustless and Madara, Black Zetsu regarded himself as an insignificant person, and the identity of Kagaya's third son was probably long gone. Acting could only be considered to have reached the pinnacle of perfection when one acted until they believed it to be true. I don't like to beat around the bush. Say what you want, Kabuto. His eyes fell on Kabuto's body. Dustless asked. His momentum was restrained, blending with nature, and his voice was slightly vicissitudes of life. So strong. Big Snake Pocket under the thick robe frowned slightly, and the corner of his eyes flashed with a strange color. The snake eyes narrowed, carefully sizing up Dustless. After a while, they suddenly emitted a cold light. My answer is, of course, to take your life. The squinted pupils suddenly opened, shooting a cold killing intent, and then Kabuto's body lost its texture, leaving a faint afterimage in the place where he originally stood. As for the main body, with just this level of skill, he was already close to Dustless. How fast! How can a mere peddler have such amazing strength? Not only was White Zetsu shocked, but even the usually silent Black Zetsu had a look of disbelief. His eyes widened, and he looked at Do in surprise. When he looked up, his vicious gaze was even more vicious than Orochimaru's in the past. Ayo, hiss hiss, the ferocious white snake went straight for Dustless's face. It opened its bloody mouth and exposed its sharp fangs. Under the sunlight, the fangs gleamed coldly. They could easily bite through steel. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. I didn't expect that not only did you seize everything from Orochimaru, you even learned the immortal techniques that he couldn't learn. You actually had the means to persuade that old snake. It seems that you're not bad, kid. Pucci. A sharp golden light shot out from his finger, and directly smashed the snake's head into a bloody mess. At the same time, Dustless's eyes emitted a cold light, and his killing intent began to soar. Chakra went berserk, overflowing with a huge breath of life. Really a troublesome monster. Looking at the broken snake head, Kabuto snorted, and his body quickly retreated. His hands formed a seal, and the majestic chakra in his body began to surge. When he was about to use a technique to capture Dustless, thick branches and vines suddenly drilled out from under his feet and tightly bound him like a python. This is Mokutan, no, this is Mokutan. His doubtful expression turned into determination and certainty, and Kabuto's face lit up. In the past, Orochimaru used Hashirama's cells to do experiments, and he also had some understanding of Mokutan. Worthy of being the monster that Orochimaru-sama can only sigh in his heart, you even have such a powerful Kekkai Genkai like Mokutan. Noticing the green vines binding his body, Kabuto wasn't stingy with his praise. Mokutan and Dustless working together was definitely the perfect combination. Sure enough, he awakened Mokutan. White and black Zetsu were unusually calm. Dustless used to cooperate with Uchiha Madara, and a large number of Hashirama's cells were integrated into his body, so it was normal that he could use Mokutan. You want to absorb my chakra? How can I let you do as you wish? Slightly frowning, Kabuto was surprised that the green vines binding his body were swallowing chakra, and he sneered again and again, looking at Dustless, his eyes filled with pride and contempt, and his body strangely melted. Like melting ice, his 1-meter-tall body turned into a puddle of water in the blink of an eye. Orochimaru-sama collected the Kekkai Genkai of various clans, and there is a lot of content. In fact, many years ago, Orochimaru began to plan to have the same ability as you, Uchiha Dustless. The puddle of water on the ground rippled and quickly shrank, turning into a figure with dense scales all over his body. There was no doubt that it was Kabuto. Now, my body is an existence beyond human knowledge, you can't hurt me, and you can't kill me. Kabuto looked at the indifferent Dustless, raised his arms and shouted loudly, his tone was unprecedentedly arrogant. Only Dustless had the ability to be immune to all physical attacks, and from now on, Kabuto would be the second person to have it. This was the power of science. There is no trick in the world that can be absolutely immune to physical attacks, including my ability. Dustless just faintly shook his head. Even if he didn't need Haki, as long as the mysterious power of gravity appeared, the invincibility of the fruit would be broken. A mere Hozuki clan's water transformation jutsu dares to say that you are immune to all attacks. Should I say that you are ignorant or naive? I'm afraid that even Orochimaru wouldn't dare to boast as shamelessly as you. It seems that after successfully practicing Sage Mode, you have forgotten how much you are worth, Kabuto. Chapter 293. Kabuto just frowned at Dustless's words. Not only did he have the water transformation jutsu that could easily ignore physical attacks, but he also investigated Uzumaki Kirin's body and implanted the cells of the Uzumaki's body into his body. As long as he was injured, he would be able to recover. With the strongest ninjutsu that could ignore physical attacks, and a body that could recover when injured, Kabuto didn't think that he was worse than Dustless. You have a sharp tongue, it's useless to show off, I will capture you and turn you into the most perfect material. Kabuto stared at Dustless ferociously. Including Zetsu, they were all perfect experimental materials, none of them could escape. His snake eyes narrowed slightly, and Kabuto's line of sight locked onto Dustless. His calm and natural appearance made Kabuto particularly angry. He had a feeling of being treated as a small character not worth mentioning. In a battle between powerhouses, one should be completely focused, and not so calm and composed, as if Kabuto Orochi was already in his grasp. First of all, Kabuto's temperament was completely defeated. Since your physique is immune to physical attacks, then how about this? Seeing Kabuto not moving for a long time, Dustless obviously lost his patience and changed from defense to offense. Chakra surged in his body, and in less than a second, a blazing fire wave came out of his mouth. Fire release, great fire annihilation. The flames reached a diameter of tens of meters, and the temperature increased by hundreds of times. The blazing high temperature evaporated all the flowers and trees, turning them into ashes. Under such high temperature, even water could only evaporate into nothingness. How can this guy's attainments in fire release be so high? His face was filled with shock. His eyes were wide open, and his mind was in chaos. Facing such a terrifying sea of fire, his entire soul was trembling. His hair stood on end as he looked at the boundless sea of fire in disgust. At the same time, he was desperately erupting chakra in his body. The so-called jutsu that could ignore physical attacks was forgotten. What a joke, such a terrifying flame would only evaporate faster if it turned into water. What a powerful nature chakra, but this guy's speed of entering sage mode is really fast. Dustless's eyes narrowed as he felt the natural power rushing through the air. Ninjas like Jiraiya and Namikaze Minato needed a certain amount of time to enter sage mode, but Kabuto only took a very short time. Senjutsu, no chance reincarnation. The lifeless charred ground suddenly surged, as if it had been given life in an instant. It began to rise rapidly, turning into an abnormally strong wall, tightly protecting the snake within. It was like an iron bucket that was watertight. The flames outside was suddenly blocked, and couldn't move forward, and could only burn in front of the large wall, and burned it black. After a long while, the grand flame gradually extinguished. Kabuto Cave Senjutsu is really good. Dustless nodded secretly, and his pupils splashed with faint ripples, looking directly at the defensive wall formed in the blink of an eye. He couldn't help but think highly of Kabuto Cave Senjutsu. It was obvious that the group of unassuming snakes were quite capable. Dustless understood the effect of this jutsu in his previous life. It can give life to inanimate objects, and it is a reincarnation ninjutsu that can be controlled. It is not a simple ninjutsu that uses chakra to control objects, and under the effect of this jutsu, the inanimate objects move quickly. But that's it. Raising his eyelids, the corner of his mouth raised a contemptuous arc. Dustless looked calm, and he didn't put the iron wall in his eyes at all, and he threw out countless dense golden light. Yasukani no Magatama. The golden energy tide surged forward and the sturdy city walls were immediately eroded by the golden light. Dust flew up and the previously intact walls were now filled with holes. The holes were like the stars in the sky. It was impossible to count how many holes there were. Boom boom boom, the wall finally fell to the ground. Dustless's cruel attack just now gave it a fatal injury, and it no longer had the ability to defend. Just one move is enough to deal with it. What a monster, but it seems I didn't choose the wrong partner. Seeing the defensive wall that was controlled by Senjutsu being destroyed in a snap of a finger, Kabuto's eyes not only didn't have any fear, but instead flashed with a dense light, and he stared at Dustless with fanatical eyes, especially his fearless and ant-like eyes, which made Kabuto even more determined. Staring at Dustless with malicious intent, the majestic chakra continued to pour out, and Kabuto showed no signs of stopping. Rumble, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, the ground under Dustless's feet suddenly surged, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, madly and rapidly rotating, forming a huge black hole that swallowed Dustless. And on the other side of the black hole was the door to the underworld. Giving life to something that doesn't have life. Looks like it's the same Senjutsu as before. Dustless jumped up, and stared at the earth whirlpool below, and couldn't help but frown. The huge whirlpool swallowed everything around it, as if it was an ancient demon god that had been given life, and if it couldn't taint it, then it couldn't reincarnate. This person is very ambitious, getting rid of him now might not be a bad thing. His eyes flashed with anger. Dustless decided to get rid of Kabuto, this eyesore. It was not a good thing to let such an ambitious person live. Especially Kabuto's ambition was not inferior to Obito and Madara. He wanted to become a legendary dragon. Dragons were actually no different from gods, and belonged to the category of legendary existences. In other words, those who wanted to become dragons actually wanted to become gods. You think you can step on thousands of living beings and show off your prowess? Dream on. He sneered at Kabuto. The murderous aura in Dustless's eyes became deeper and deeper. His scarlet eyes shot out a hellish bloody aura. The evil eternal Mangekyo Sharingan focused on Kabuto's body, and the corners of his mouth rose into an evil smile. Orochimaru's death is very suitable for you. Chapter 294. Gently raising his eyes, looking at Dustless in the sky, Kabuto finally understood Orochimaru's feelings. The most tragic thing in the world is this: a perfect specimen is right in front of you, but you're helpless to find that you don't have the ability to dissect the perfect specimen. It's really a tragedy. It's not too late to try again. In short, I can't let go of such a rare opportunity. After hesitating for a moment, Kabuto was resolute and decisive. The cooked duck was leaving him just like that. How could Kabuto be willing to do that? Chakra gushed out, and just as he was about to fight with Dustless again, his body suddenly burned with black flames. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. It's really strong. The intense burning pain spread all over his body, and Kabuto was slightly stunned, looking at the black flames burning on his back. His face was full of surprise, and the desire in his eyes was undisguised. The power of the Sharingan is known throughout the world, especially Dustless's eyes. It's even more difficult to estimate. This kind of power is something that everyone wants. Orochimaru was like that, and now Kabuto, who inherited everything from him, was no exception. But how can this kind of flame burn me? I'm a snake sage. Glancing at the black flames on his back, Kabuto showed a contemptuous smile, and immediately the skin on his back suddenly dried and cracked, and the black flames slowly fell off, still molting. The substitution jutsu is very useful. Dustless, who was floating in the sky, slightly frowned. The substitution jutsu is the best ninjutsu to resist the Amaterasu. Orochimaru and Sasuke used this jutsu to resist the erosion of the Amaterasu again and again. I didn't expect this little bug to have some skills. Dustless looked down at Kabuto's ugly face with a smile, and said indifferently. Looking at Kabuto, he showed a teasing smile like a cat playing with a mouse. That kind of look is really unpleasant. Raising his eyebrows, Kabuto's pale face suddenly became gloomy. Dustless's smile made his whole body uncomfortable. It was obviously a hunter in high spirits teasing a dying prey. Do you still think I'm the same small character from before? In the past, he was just Orochimaru's subordinate. To put it bluntly, he was just Orochimaru's henchman. However, things were very different now. Kabuto was naturally one of the protagonists of this world. Whether it was his current strength or his trump cards, they were all better than Orochimaru. Dustless was still looking at him like an ant. How could he be angry? His body once again gathered rich of natural chakra. You're asking for it. Seeing Kabuto's nature power gather, Wu-Chin sneered even more. Kabuto dared to show off his immortal technique in front of him. He really didn't know where his confidence came from. But you already have no chance, Kabuto. Looking down indifferently at Kabuto, who was eager to give it a try, Dustless put his hands together and the boundless chakra gushed out again. Just as he was about to give him a fatal blow, Kabuto's voice sounded, and his words were shocking. Dustless didn't recover for a long time. Why don't we try to cooperate? Kabuto stared at Dustless, his words shocking everyone. His tone was like an ancient well, calm and composed. His confident appearance made people unable to help but be stunned. Fuku's confident appearance clearly showed that he was in the bag. Hearing this, Dustless just looked indifferently at Kabuto, then closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, "The people who want to cooperate with me are like carp crossing the river. Unfortunately your name isn't among them, Kabuto." Raising his eyes, Dustless looked at Kabuto indifferently, and refused without hesitation. Kabuto. That's a pretty good name. Kabuto's eyes flashed, and looking at Dustless's eyes, he said bluntly, "Of the people who want to cooperate with you, I'm naturally one of them, and I'm going to be your most important partner." His tone was full of confidence. Kabuto wasn't worried about whether Dustless would agree to the alliance or not. He could see that Dustless was the kind of person with ambition. He absolutely wouldn't refuse to cooperate with him because of personal grudges. Kabuto and Dustless's goal was almost the same. They both wanted to conquer the world. Wishful thinking. Indifferently looking at Kabuto, Dustless sneered in his heart. Precisely because the two of them had the same goal, Dustless couldn't cooperate with this kind of person. Especially in this situation, he could take advantage of this opportunity to kill him. If you and I cooperate, there are only a few dozen S-class ninjas in Akatsuki, the rest of them have almost no fighting power. I can use my subordinates to make up for your manpower, Kabuto said confidently, as if he was sure that Dustless would agree, but he was doomed to be disappointed. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not interested in cooperating with you. Your so-called subordinates should be the legacy of Orochimaru, the strong corpses he plundered. Although it's very tempting, but don't you think that as long as I kill you, I can get everything from you? Staring indifferently at Kabuto, Dustless asked with a murderous aura. His majestic murderous aura wasn't concealed at all. The terrifying murderous aura directly dyed the entire sky into a gloomy blood-red color, as if a god was enraged. The entire world was pervaded with an unprecedented pressure. Kabuto just smiled. He had an important bargaining chip, and the Kage corpses were just appetizers. What came next was the main course. I'll give you the heaviest main course, Kabuto smiled strangely, and suddenly made a hand seal. The ground also burst open, and an ancient coffin broke out from the depths of the ground, filling the air with the smell of decay. Chapter 295. The ancient coffin came into view, and it was filled with the smell of time. At first glance, one could tell that it wasn't an ordinary thing, especially the ancient aura on it. Even after the passage of many years, the invincible aura lingering on it could still be felt vaguely. There was no need to think about it to know who was in the coffin. Only Hashirama and Madara had such a level of power. Now that the corpses of Hashirama and other Hokage were in Dustless's hands, it was self-evident who was in the coffin. Uchiha Madara. No wonder I couldn't find him for so long, he actually ran into this kid's hands. Dustless's eyes were like torches. He was sure that the person in the coffin was definitely Madara. Kakaka, as if he was afraid that Dustless didn't know who was in the coffin, Kabuto snorted, and the lid of the coffin suddenly fell off, revealing a very young middle-aged man. The person sleeping in the coffin had black hair, handsome facial features, and was wearing dark red armor. Even if he was just lying quietly, he was showing a domineering aura. There was no doubt that it was Uchiha Madara. Damn Black Setsu. Seeing this, Dustless cursed in his heart. He knew that Black Setsu deliberately gave this to Kabuto. Where is Madara's body? Black Setsu is the only one in the world who knows. This old guy didn't want to help Madara from the beginning, he just wanted to use him. Is my strength enough to make you trust me so much? You really are the kind of person who understands the importance of caution. Fine, I will fulfill your wish and cooperate with this brat once. Let's see who will have the last laugh. Dustless began to plan to cooperate with Kabuto. This kid controlled a large number of Edo Tensei. If he didn't pull him to his side, there would be a lot of trouble. Even if the Edo Tensei army was useless to Dustless, White Setsu was the natural enemy of the Edo Tensei. That's the only way. The corner of his eyes swept past Kabuto. Dustless made a decision. Although there was the suspicion of asking a tiger for its skin, with Kabuto's small appetite, it would be 100 years before he could swallow Dustless. There's no problem with working together, but, staring at Kabuto's face, Dustless snorted, too lazy to talk nonsense, and said coldly, I still can't trust you. White Setsu's clone must stay by your side to monitor you. If you agree, from now on, we will be allies. Kabuto frowned. He did have a plan, and it was nothing more than the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Now that Dustless sent White Setsu's clone to monitor him, it would be very inconvenient to take the Sharingan. No problem. After thinking for a while, Kabuto gritted his teeth and made a decision. White Setsu's clone was just a rookie among rookies. When he took the Sharingan, he could easily kill him, and then betray the Akatsuki. Moreover, Kabuto didn't intend to take the Sharingan now. Anyway, Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke couldn't escape from them. As for Dustless's Manjikyu Sharingan, Kabuto didn't think much about it. People must have self-awareness. He also realized that he and Dustless were aware of it, and even if he wanted to take the Sharingan, it would be in the future, not now. Happy cooperation. Showing a warm smile towards Dustless, Kabuto politely stretched out his right hand. However, unfortunately, Dustless didn't intend to shake hands with him. He directly ignored him, didn't even look at him, treated him like air. Who knows how many dead snakes he touched, how many monster experiments he did, Dustless didn't want to touch him. Damn Black Setsu, sooner or later I will tear you to pieces. For the time being, I will let you live for 2 more days. The monstrous killing intent in his heart calmed down. Dustless secretly thought, Uchiha Madara's body has been kept by Black Setsu, but this old guy gave it to Kabuto instead of his ally, Dustless. As for what method, I'm afraid only ghosts know. This old guy wants Kabuto use Madara to suppress me, naive. Immediately understanding Black Setsu's meaning, Dustless secretly sneered. I'm afraid that the reason why Black Setsu gave Madara's body to Kabuto was to use it to deter Dustless. But he didn't know that the current Dustless was not afraid of Madara, and Dustless was not the fragile fledgling of the past. Even if he met Madara at his peak, Dustless could fight him. Ah. It seems that someone is coming, do you want to kill them all? The perception in Sage mode was naturally extremely strong, and Kabuto naturally felt that it was Konoha's ninja who came to support Team 10. Immediately, he stretched out his disgusting snake head and licked his lips, which was particularly creepy. Of course, his line of sight faintly locked onto the 10th squad that was fighting in the distance, as well as Fei Duan and Kakuzu who were fighting with them with all their might. His face was covered with frost that seemed to be isolated from the world, and his voice that was as calm as an ancient well resounded through the sky. Konoha's ninja, including Haiden and Kakuzu. Kill them all. Wu Chen's squinted eyes suddenly enlarged. His voice was full of murderous intent. His cold eyes were no different from a dead man's. There was no emotion that a human should have. Dustless did not have the slightest mercy to Kakuzu and Haiden, as well as the members of Team 10 and Kakashi. According to his estimation, he didn't have much confidence in Mei. Until today, he still didn't have confidence in Mei, and only by using force to pressure the Cloud Village to tell him where Mei went. Even Haiden and Kakuzu are killed, what a cold man. Hearing this, Kabuto stared at Dustless in surprise. He didn't expect this guy to be so cold-blooded, and even kill his own people. But soon, he laughed strangely, and said gloomily, if those 2 guys were killed by the people they usually look down on the most, their faces must be rich. Chapter 296. Zetsu silently followed behind Dustless. It was not good for him to interrupt. White Zetsu did not approve of working together with Kabuto, just looking at his disgusting appearance was enough to make people want to vomit, not to mention monitoring him closely. Thinking about it, White Zetsu felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't help but shiver. In particular, the current Kabuto was even worse than Orochimaru. He was far more disgusting and crazy than Orochimaru. The scales on Kabuto's skin reminded White Zetsu of some kind of creature. I really don't know what Dustless-sama is thinking, choosing to cooperate with such a barbaric creature. White Zetsu seemed to be thinking of the bitter life in the future, and complained with dissatisfaction. Whether it was Orochimaru or Kabuto, White Setsu didn't like people who were related to snakes. It doesn't matter if you don't know now. Later, you will know how brilliant Dustless Sama's plan is. Ignoring White Setsu, Black Setsu laughed. His voice was particularly hoarse, obviously full of other meanings. Madara's body was naturally given to Kabuto by Black Setsu. He originally wanted to give it to Kabuto in the future, but Dustless's growth was beyond his imagination, and someone had to stop him. The original candidate was Orochimaru, but now that Orochimaru was dead, only Kabuto, who came later, temporarily replaced him. However, the effect was quite good, and Dustless did indeed agree to cooperate with Kabuto. Dustless Sama's power is unparalleled. Naturally, he can suppress Kabuto. It seemed that after seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya resurrected intact, Black Setsu laughed mockingly, and there was a hint of ridicule and gloating in his tone. His sight seemed to have crossed the layers of time and space, seeing Dustless, Madara, and Obito's sad expression when they knew the truth. For Black Setsu, this was definitely the most unforgettable scene, and also the reward for his hard work over the years. Uchiha Dustless, Uchiha Itachi, and Uchiha Sasuke. Not only you three brothers, but the whole world will be my test ground in the future. His eyes flashed with a scorching light, and Kabuto said in his heart. Kabuto inherited everything from Orochimaru, including Orochimaru's research materials, as well as his body and will. In any case, as long as it was something Orochimaru had, Kabuto inherited it all. Orochimaru's goal was to evolve into a legendary creature, a dragon. The dragon was a supreme existence through and through. This kind of creature that only existed in myths and legends could summon the wind and rain. Just like Dustless, they could soar through the void at will and shatter the earth with a snap of their fingers. Furthermore, the dragon had broken free from the restrictions of the 6 realms of reincarnation and was immortal. His strength was at least on the same level as the 10-tailed beast, or even higher. Your ambition is not small. A mere beast with scales and horns wants to transcend. You overestimate yourself. There are many paths to godhood, but there is no place for you, Kabuto Orochi. The corner of his eyes fell on Kabuto, and Dustless's eyes flashed with ridicule. He secretly shook his head. A soft-bodied creature that danced with rats also wanted to shake the earth. It was very funny. Although Kabuto Orochi had the mentality of a dragon, for example, he had many horns on his head when he entered Sage mode, but it couldn't be said that he had evolved into a dragon. In Dustless's eyes, the Sage mode Kabuto Orochi was just a slightly stronger bug. Even if one day Kabuto Orochi evolved into a dragon, it would still look like a god. The real dragon originated from the inheritance in the depths of the blood and soul. That was the nobility of life, and not the evolution of a beast like the white phosphorus Orochi. His heart was pitiable, and his ambition should be punished. As a mortal, he had the heart to become a god. This lofty aspiration was indeed worthy of praise, but such an arrogant idea was tantamount to indirectly touching Dustless's bottom line. After losing his value, Kabuto Orochi would be Dustless's first target to clean up. There is also Black Setsu. Thinking of Black Setsu, Dustless's ridicule became more obvious. That old fellow planned everything, but he met a more powerful transcended person than him. Looking at the crowd, Dustless was the only one who knew Black Setsu's plan. When I devour Kagaya, I also want to see your face when you grit your teeth. Laughing, Dustless's footsteps became lighter and more powerful. It would be good if he could find Nibi's Jinchuriki, but if he couldn't, he could only create it himself. As for what method he used, it was not for others to know. It's really strange. What are they so happy about? White Setsu's eyes were blank. He wasn't very good at scheming, but he could see that whether it was Dustless or Kabuto, they were very happy. Even Black Setsu's other half gave him a feeling of joy. Do we really have to kill them both? After all, they were partners in the past. Looking at Haiden and Kakuzu, White Setsu was quite complicated. Humans are not plants, they can't be emotionless. Except for Black Setsu, no one here could completely wipe out their inner feelings. It was the same for Kabuto and Dushless. It was precisely because humans had complex emotions that they were humans. If one day they completely lost their emotions, they would just live like a walking corpse. For example, Black Setsu now, although he also had his own emotions, in the end, it was just Kagaya's will. Since you can't do it, leave this kind of thing to me. I'm very interested in the zombie duo, in the Akatsuki. Kabuto licked his lips and laughed eerily. He was passionate about human experiments, and those bodies that couldn't be broken no matter how much he played with them were naturally more interested. Kabuto. Dustless turned his head and glanced at him. His eyes were calm as he stared at Kakuzu and Haiden, who were fighting with Konoha's team, 10, including Kakuzu. Kill them all. Hearing this, Kabuto frowned, and his face flashed with displeasure. Dustless and he had a cooperative relationship, but his tone was commanding. However, for my precious experiment material, I will reluctantly listen to you this time. Chapter 297. Kabuto's goal wasn't immortality. The reason why he pursued immortality was because he needed enough time to explore the truth of the world. Although I'm very unhappy about your life, I'll reluctantly agree to your conditions for the sake of these experimental subjects. However, their corpses are mine. Kabuto's eyes glowed with a green luster as he said with extreme thirst, the bodies of these people are not bad, they are mine. In your dreams, they are members of the organization, they are ghosts of the organization. Black Setsu stared at Kabuto with dissatisfaction as he refuted mercilessly. With Dustless here, Kabuto wouldn't be able to kill anyone. At the same time, he was cursing Kabuto's greed. The number of Edo Tensei in his hands was definitely not less than 3 digits. It doesn't matter, if you have the ability, go ahead and take it. Wuchen said expressionlessly as he looked at Kabuto indifferently. He closed his eyes and stood there motionlessly. He didn't look like he was going to make a move. He signaled Kabuto to take it himself if he had the ability. Dustless, Sama. It doesn't matter, Setsu. Waving his hand, Dustless raised his eyelids and looked at the void in front of him, then he said casually, since we have become allies, I also hope that you will use their bodies to deal with the enemy, since he has already joined forces with Kabuto. As long as the Edo Tensei army is used on the enemy, it doesn't matter who has it. Of course, this is not a problem. Kabuto breathed a sigh of relief, and the rock in his heart disappeared. If Dustless didn't back down, he could only admit defeat. After all, Dustless's strength was obvious to all, and the cooperation between the two sides was based on strength. In other words, whoever has the bigger fist has the final say. Since that's the case, it would be impolite for me to accept them. Afraid that Dustless would go back on his words, Kabuto roared out like a cannonball, heading straight toward Haiden and Kakuzu, as well as the people of Konoha's ninja village. You don't know what's good for you. But it's good to see you make a fool of yourself. Do you think Kakuzu, Haiden, and Konoha's ninjas are worthless? How foolish. Seeing Orochi Baguette burst out and turned into a divine rainbow roaring out, Wu Chen's indifferent face raised a wicked smile, making Black Setsu and White Setsu uncomfortable with goosebumps. They all sighed inwardly that this snake immortal was going to be unlucky. Kakuzu and Haiden were S-class ninjas, and Kakashi wasn't weak either. His monocular Mangekyo wasn't something to be trifled with. There was no doubt about the strength of Kakuzu and Haiden, especially the group of ninjas from Konoha. The fact that they were able to fight the zombie duo indirectly showed that they were extraordinary and powerful. In particular, there were a lot of Konoha's ninjas coming to support them. Even if Kabuto's strength was unprecedented, he would have to lose 2 of his canine teeth if he wanted to take down this group of people. This is a good show. White Setsu said with a smile. To be able to see Kabuto make a fool of himself, there was nothing more exciting than watching Kabuto get beaten up. Wuchen also looked at this scene in ridicule, and a gloating expression emerged on his face. He looked quite different from his usual self, just like a little kid who loved to play pranks. Well, where did these stinky snakes come from? The two groups of people who were fighting stopped one after another. They looked at the huge snake swarm that was flying over from the ground in confusion. Both of them showed a cautious expression without prior agreement. Kakuzu, it's not Orochimaru, is it? Fei Duan frowned and spoke in a rather displeased tone. There was a hint of disgust in his voice as he looked at the group of snakes in the distance. Countless small snakes gathered together and pressed over like a huge wave. The number was simply impossible to estimate. I don't know the specific situation, but I'm afraid no one other than Orochimaru can easily use this kind of jutsu. Kakuzu frowned, and his eyes were cautious. Orochimaru was the kind of person who was cautious. If it was really him, then he must have other tricks up his sleeve. Kakashi-sensei, this seems to be the same as during the Chunin exam. Nara Shikamaru's thoughts were immersed in his memories, thinking of Orochimaru's sudden attack on Konoha during the Chunin exam. He couldn't help but be cautious. Yes, it's most likely Orochimaru. This is bad. Kakashi's Scarlet Manjikyu Sharingan stared at the sea of snakes in front of him. Kakashi's heart clenched, and he felt extremely depressed. He subconsciously looked at Kakuzu and Haiden who were talking about Orochimaru. Orochimaru once had a close relationship with these two. Let's clean up this group of snakes first. After narrowing his eyes and pondering for a while, Kakuzu was the first to speak. No one can tolerate countless white snakes swimming around them while they are fighting. For the time being, let's clean up the white snakes, but be careful of the Akatsuki duo. Kakuzu also said firmly. They were surrounded by dense snakes, and even if they wanted to take the opportunity to escape, they had to clean up the snakes first. Naturally, the two opposing sides began to clean up this group of giant snakes at the same time. Boom, 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 all kinds of ninjutsu began to roar, intertwining with bright colors. After all, they were all animals, even if there were more of them, they were still the targets of torture. For a time, the scene was bloody, and the ground was full of snake heads. This is not over yet. It's just the dessert before the meal, next is the main course. Kakuzu frowned, looking at the snake heads on the ground, and said indifferently. This group of good experimental materials, he won't let them go in vain. Most importantly, there was still Dustless, this spectator-like ally, watching from behind. If his technique was so easily broken, it was inevitable that their strategic alliance would decline. And Kakuzu also felt that Dustless will look down on him. Let's add some more seasoning. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.